I'm so sleepy. Is that a... What kind of omen is that? Is that a good omen? Is that a bad omen? I'm so sleepy. Hello everybody, hi Patches and Mini. That's right. Yeah, I overslept for every day of the week. I think this week I couldn't stay awake. I had to lie down, and I overslept twice today. In fact, I woke up just past stream start time today. I posted in my Discord. I overslept the naps. They're strong, and then I fell asleep again, and then I slept an hour more, and then I crawled out of bed, and now I'm here. This the season. It's that time of the year, baby. Hey, Wayward Bard. Thank you for lurking. Hell yeah. I'll be reading Good Omens today, yet again. We're at the chapter titled Saturday, which is 44% of the way through the book. I will try and get this done this weekend. Get the rest of this book done. But perhaps we'll have to do another extra stream, so 3 more streams of this. Get 20%, then another 20 maybe, and then just... we'll see how my mouth and throat feels. What even happened yesterday? Last time. There were witch hunters, there was a lot of things going on. Adam, the son of Satan, he was making things manifest with his powers. Yes. And it seems like he's been found by our funny little guys, the angel and the devil. Yes, I think that's what happened. I'm too sleepy to actually recount. Thank you, phone, for reminding me I should mute your ass. God dang it. I'm too sleepy to like properly recount what happened last time. My brain just doesn't brain. Do not disturb me, telephone, again, or you shall be destroyed. You shall be vanquished. Music be gone. Archibald, your tail is on my mouse. I cannot move it. Do not wiggle it as if you're offended. This is my desk. This is not your bed. In fact, telephone, if you could kindly let me show everybody what Archibald looks like at this moment in time, I shall display you to the masses of the internet. Yeah. Oh, it's not gonna connect as a piece of garbage. I hate telephones. I hate the internet and computers. Oh. Now that's weird. Whoa, what the hell? Give me just 1 second. I have like a sudden bout of dizziness and nausea. What the hell? Hold on. Give me a second, need some water. Ooh, what in the world? Well, let me put on some music. Well, that's strange. What's that all about? Archibald, do you know what this is all about? Do you understand the implications of what this is all about, Archie? Anyway, hopefully I don't like explode into projectile vomits all over the the walls and my screen while reading. That was really bizarre what that happened. Anyway, let's get through it. Let's get through it before I oh, Shala, hello. You're radical. 80 is a pretty radical number. You're ready for words. Let's hope it's not words made out of stomach contents. Let me post a little picture-roo of what this fancy little eye looks like on this. Hold on. Focus, you foolish thing. Let me show you the pretty little eye that is at the forefront of this chapter of the book. Get 47% off PlayStation games, says my telephone. I don't have a PlayStation. Look at this eye. Look at this eye. It is a... What is that? It is a dragon? What is that thing? I don't know. Looks like a cat litter scoop on a pedestal or something. I'm not sure. Anyway. It was very early on Saturday morning. My music isn't playing. It was very early on Saturday morning, on the last day of the world, and the sky was redder than blood. The International Express delivery man rounded the corner at a careful 35 miles an hour, shifted down to second, and pulled up on the grass verge. He got out of the van and immediately threw himself into a ditch to avoid an oncoming lorry that had barreled around the bend at something well in excess of 80 miles an hour. He got up, picked up his glasses, put them back on, retrieved his parcel and clipboard, brushed the grass and mud from his uniform, and, as an afterthought, shook his fist at the rapidly diminishing lorry. Shouldn't be allowed, bloody lorries. No respect for other road users. What I always say is remember that without a car, son, you're just a pedestrian too. He climbed down the grassy verge, clambered over a low fence, and found himself beside the river Uck. The International Express delivery man walked along the banks of the river, holding the parcel. Further down the riverbank sat a young man dressed all in white. He was the only person in sight. His hair was white, his skin chalk pale, and he sat and stared up and down the river as if he were admiring the view. He looked like Victorian romantic poets looked just before the consumption and drug abuse really started to cut it. The International Express man couldn't understand it. I mean, in the old days, and it wasn't that long ago, really, there had been an angler every dozen yards along the bank. Children had played there, courting couples, and had come to listen to the splish and gurgle of the river, and to hold hands, and to get all lovey-dovey in the Sussex sunset. He'd done that with Maud, his missus, before they were married. They'd come here to spoon, and on one memorable occasion... Fuck. Times changed, reflected the delivery man. Now white and brown sculptures of foam and sludge drifted serenely down the river, often covering it for yards at a stretch. And where the surface of the water was visible, it was covered with a molecule's thin petrochemical sheen. There was a loud whirring as a couple of geese, thankful to be back in England again after the long, exhausting flight across the northern Atlantic, landed on the rainbow-slicked water and sank without a trace. Funny old world, thought the delivery man. Here's the Uck. Used to be the prettiest river in this part of the world, and now it's just a glorified industrial sewer. The swans sink to the bottom, and the fishes float on the top. Well, that's progress for you. You can't stop progress. He had reached the man in white. Excuse me, sir. Party name of Chalky? The man in white nodded, said nothing. He continued to gaze out at the river, following an impressive sludge and foam sculpture with his eyes. So beautiful, he whispered. It's all so damn beautiful. The delivery man found himself temporarily devoid of words. Then his automatic systems cut in. Funny old world, isn't it? And no mistake. I mean, you go all over the world delivering, and then here you are practically in your own home, so to speak. I mean, I was born and bred round here, sir, and I've been to the Mediterranean and to Des Moines, and that's in America, sir, and now here I am, and here's your parcel, sir. Party name of Chalky took the parcel and took the clipboard and signed for the parcel. The pen developed a leak as he did so, and his signature obliterated itself as it was written. It was a long word, and it began with a P, and then there was a splodge, and then it ended in something that might have been ence, and might have been tuition. Much obliged, sir, said the delivery man. He walked back along the river, back towards the busy road where he had left his van, trying not to look at the river as he went. Behind him, the man in white opened the parcel. In it was a crown, a circlet of white metal, set with diamonds. He gazed at it for some seconds, with satisfaction, then put it on. It glinted in the light of the rising sun. Then the tarnish, which had begun to suffuse its silver surface when his fingers touched it, spread to cover it completely, and the crown went black. White stood up. And there's one thing you can say for air pollution. You get utterly amazing sunrises. It looked like someone had set fire to the sky. And the careless match would have set fire to the river, but alas, there was no time for that now. In his mind he knew where the four of them would be meeting, and when, and he was going to have to hurry to be there by this afternoon. Perhaps we will set fire to the sky, he thought, and he left that place, almost imperceptibly. It was nearly time. The delivery man had left his van on the grass verge by the dual carriageway. He walked around to the driver's side, carefully, because other cars and lorries were still rocketing around the bend. He reached in through the open window and took the schedule from the dashboard. Only one more delivery to make, then. He read the instructions on the delivery voucher carefully. He read them again, paying particular attention to the address and the message. The address was one word: everywhere. Then, with his leaking pen, he wrote a brief note to Maud, his wife. It read simply, "I love you." Then he put the schedule back on the dashboard, looked left, looked right, looked left again, and began to walk purposefully across the road. He was halfway across when a German juggernaut came around the corner, its driver crazed on caffeine, little white pills, and the EEC transport regulations. He watched its receding bulk. Core, he thought. That one nearly had me. Then he looked down at the gutter. Oh, he thought. Yes, agreed a voice from behind his left shoulder, or at least from behind the memory of his left shoulder. The delivery man turned, and looked, and saw. At first, he couldn't find the words, couldn't find anything. And then the habits of a working lifetime took over and he said, "Message for you, sir." "For me?" "Yes, sir." He wished he still had a throat. He could have swallowed if he still had a throat. No package, I'm afraid, sir. It's a message. Deliver it, then. It's the sir, Come and see. Finally. There was a grin on its face, but then given the face, there couldn't have been anything else. Thank you, it continued. I must commend your devotion to duty. Sir? The late delivery man was falling through a gray mist, and all he could see were two spots of blue that might have been eyes and might have been distant stars. Don't think of it as dying, said Death. Just think of it as leaving early to avoid the rush. The delivery man had a brief moment to wonder whether his new companion was making a joke, and to decide that he wasn't, and then there was nothing. Red sky in the morning. It was going to rain. Yes. Witchfinder Sergeant Shadwell stood back with his head on one side. Right then, he said. You're all ready. You got it all? Yes, sir. Pendulum of Discovery? Pendulum of Discovery? Yes. Thumbscrew. Newt swallowed and patted the pocket. Thumbscrew, he said. Firelighters? I really think, Sergeant, that... Firelighters? Firelighters, said Newt sadly. And matches. The footnote reads, Note for Americans and other city-dwelling life forms. The rural British having eschewed central heating as being far too complicated and in any case weakening moral fiber prefer a system of piling small pieces of wood and lumps of coal, topped by large wet logs, possibly made of asbestos, into small smoldering heaps known as... There's nothing like a roaring open fire, is there? Since none of these ingredients are naturally inclined to burn, underneath all this they apply a small rectangular waxy white lump, which burns cheerfully until the weight of the fire puts it out. These little white blocks are called firelighters. No one knows why. And the footnote. Bell book and candle? Newt patted another pocket. It contained a paper bag inside which was a small bell of the sort that maddens budgerigers, and a pink candle of the birthday cake persuasion, and a tiny book called Prayers for Little Hands. Shadwell had impressed upon him that, although witches were the primary target, a good witchfinder should never pass up the chance to do a quick exorcism, and should have his field kit with him at all times. Bell, book, and candle, said Newt. Pin? Pin. Good lad. Never forget your pin. It's the bayonet in your artillery light. Shadwell stood back. Newt noticed with amazement that the old man's eyes had misted over. I wish I was going with ye, he said. Of course this won't be anything, but it'd be good to get out and about again. It's a trying life, ye ken. All this lying in the wet bracken spring on ye devilish dancing. It gets into her bones, something cruel. He straightened up and saluted. Off ye go then, Private Pulsifer. May the armies of glorification march with ye. After Newt had driven off, Shadwell thought of him something that he'd never had the chance to do before. What he needed now was a pin. Not a military issue pin, which is for the use of just an ordinary pin, such as you might stick in a map. The map was on the wall. It was old. It didn't show Milton Keynes. It didn't show Harlow. It barely showed Manchester and Birmingham. It had been the Army's HQ map for 300 years. There were a few pins in it still, mainly in Yorkshire and Lancashire, and a few next Essex, but they were almost rusted through. Elsewhere, mere brown stubs indicated the distant mission of a long-ago witchfinder. Shadwell finally found a pin among the debris in an ashtray. He breathed on it, polished it to shine, squinted at the map until he located Tadfield, and triumphantly rammed the pin home. It gleamed. Shadwell took a step backward and saluted again. There were tears in his eyes. Then he did a smart about turn and saluted the display cabinet. It was old and battered, and the glass was broken, but in a way it was the WA. It contained the regimental silver, the inter-battalion golf trophy, not competed for, alas, in 70 years. It contained the patent muzzle-loading thunder gun of Witchfinder Colonel, "Ye shall not eat any living thing with the blood, neither shall ye use enchantment, nor observe times, Darlimpel." It contained the display of what were apparently walnuts, but were in reality a collection of shrunken headhunter heads donated by Witchfinder CSM Horace Get him afore they get you, Narker, who traveled widely in foreign parts. It contained memories. Shadwell blew his nose noisily on his sleeve. Then he opened a tin of condensed milk for breakfast. If the armies of glorification had tried to march with Newt, bits of them would have dropped off. This is because, apart from Newt and Shadwell, they had been dead for quite a long time. It was a mistake to think of Shadwell. Newt never found it out if he had a first name, as a lone nut. It was just that all the others were dead, in most cases for several hundred years. Once the army had been as big as it currently appeared in Shadwell's creatively edited bookkeeping. Newt had been surprised to find that the Witchfinder army had antecedents as long and almost as bloody as its more mundane counterpart. The rates of pay for Witchfinders had last been set by Oliver Cromwell and never reviewed. Officers got a crown, and the general got a sovereign. It was just an honorarium, of course, because you got 9p per witch found, and first pick of their property. You really got to rely on those 9 pences, and so times had been a bit hard before Shadwell had gone on the payrolls of heaven and hell. Newt's pay was 1 old shilling per year. Footnote. Note for young people and Americans. 1 shilling equals 5p. It helps to understand the antique finances of the Witchfinder army if you know the original British monetary system. 2 farthings equals 1 ha'penny. 2 ha'pennies equals 1 penny. 3 pennies, a threepenny bit. 2 threepennies, a sixpence. 2 sixpences, 1 shilling, or bob. 2 bob, a florin. 1 florin and 1 sixpence equals half a crown. 4 half crowns equals 10 bob note. 2 10 bob notes equals 1 pound, or 240 pennies. 1 pound and 1 shilling equals 1 guinea. The British resisted decimalized currency for a long time because they thought it was too complicated. End of footnote. In return for this, he was charged to keep Glimmer, Firelock, Firebox, Tinderbox, or igniferous matches about his person at all times, although Shadwell indicated that the Ronzon gas lighter would do very well. Shadwell had accepted the invention of the patent cigarette lighter in the same way that conventional soldiers welcomed the repeating rifle. The way Newt looked at it, it was like being in one of those organizations like the Sealed Knot, or those people who kept on refighting the American Civil War. It got you out at weekends, and meant that you were keeping alive fine old traditions that had made Western civilization what it was today. An hour after leaving the headquarters, Newt pulled into a lay-by and rummaged in the box on the passenger seat. Then he opened the car window using a pair of pliers for the purpose, since the handle had long since fallen off. The packet of firelighters was sent whinging over the hedge. A moment later, the thumbscrew followed it. He debated about the rest of the stuff, and then put it back in the box. The pin was Witchfinder military issue, with a good ebony knob on the end, like a lady's hat pin. He knew what it was for. He'd done quite a lot of reading. Shadwell had piled him up with pamphlets at their first meeting, but the army had also accumulated various books and documents which Newt suspected would be worth a fortune if they ever hit the market. The pin was to jab into suspects. If there was a spot on their body where they didn't feel anything, they were a witch. Simple. Some of the fraudulent witch-finders had used special restraining pins, but this one was honest, solid steel. He wouldn't be able to look old Shadwell in the face if he threw away the pin. Besides, it was probably bad luck. He started the engine and resumed his journey. Newt's car was a wasabi. He called it Dick Turpin, in the hope that one day someone would ask him why. It would be a very accurate historian who could pinpoint the precise day when the Japanese changed from being fiendish automatons who copied everything from the West to becoming skilled and cunning engineers who would leave the West standing. But the wasabi had been designed on that one confused day and combined the traditional bad points of most Western cars with a host of innovative disasters, and the avoidance of which had made firms like Honda and Toyota what they were today. Newt had never actually seen another one on the road, despite his best efforts. For years, and without much conviction, he'd entrusted to his friends about its economy and efficiency in the desperate hope that one of them might buy one, because misery loves company. In vain did he point out its 823cc engine, its free-speed gearbox, its incredible safety devices like the balloons which inflated on dangerous occasions, such as when you were doing 45 miles per hour on a straight, dry road but were about to crush because a huge safety balloon had just obscured the view. It also waxed slightly lyrical about the Korean-made radio, which picked up Radio Pyongyang incredibly well, and the simulated electronic voice which warned you about not wearing a seatbelt even when you were. It had been programmed by someone who not only didn't understand English but didn't understand Japanese either. It was state-of-the-art, he said. The art in this case was probably pottery. His friends nodded and agreed, and privately decided that if it ever came to buying a wasabi or walking, they'd invest in a pair of shoes. It came to the same thing anyway, since one reason for the wasabi's incredible miles per gallon was the fact that it spent a lot of time waiting in garages, while crankshafts and things were in the post from the world's only surviving wasabi agent in Nigirizushi, Japan. In that vague, zen-like trance in which most people drive, Newt found himself wondering exactly how he used the pin. Did you say, "I've got a pin, and I'm not afraid to use it"? Have pin, will travel. The pinslinger, the man with the golden pin, the pins of Navarone. It might have interested Newt to know that, of the 39,000 women tested with the pin during the centuries of witch hunting, 29,000 said, ouch. 9,999 didn't feel anything because of the use of the aforesaid retractable pins, and one witch declared that it had miraculously cleared up the arthritis in her leg. Her name was Agnes Nutter. She was the Witchfinder Army's great failure. One of the early entries in the nice and accurate prophecies concerned Agnes's Nutter own death. The English, by and large, being a crass and indolent race, were not as keen on burning women as other countries in Europe. In Germany, the bonfires were built and burned with regular Teutonic thoroughness. Even the pious Scots, locked throughout history in a long drawn-out battle with their arch-enemies, the Scots, managed a few burnings to while away the long winter evenings, but English never seemed to have the heart for it. One reason for this may have to do with the manner of Agnes Nutter's deaths, which more or less marked the end of the serious witch-hunting craze in England. A howling mob, reduced to utter fury by her habit of going around being intelligent and curing people, arrived at her house one April evening to find her sitting with her coat on, waiting for them. "You're tardy," she said to them. "I should have been aflame 10 minutes since." Then she got up and hobbled slowly through the suddenly silent crowd out of the cottage and to the bonfire that had been hastily thrown together on the village green. Legend says that she climbed awkwardly onto the pyre and thrust her arms around the stake behind her. "Tie it well," she said to the astonished witchfinder. And then, as the villagers sidled towards the pyre, she raised her handsome head in the firelight and said, "Gather ye right close, good people. Come close until the fires near scorch ye, for I charge ye that all must see how the last true witch in England dies. For which I am, for so I am judged. Yet I know not what my true crime may be, and therefore let mine death be a message to the world. Gather ye right close, I say, and mark well the fate of all who meddle with such as they do none understand. And apparently she smiled and looked up at the sky over the village and added, That goes for you as well, you daft old fool. And after that strange blasphemy she said no more. She let them gag her, and stood imperiously as the torches were put to the dry wood. The crowd grew nearer, one or two of its members a little uncertain as to whether they'd done the right thing. Now they came to think about it. 30 seconds later, an explosion took out the village green, scythed the valley clean of every little thing, and was seen as far away as Halifax. There was much subsequent debate as to whether this had been sent by God or by Satan, but a note later found in Agnes Nutter's cottage indicated that any divine or devilish intervention had been materially helped by the contents of Agnes's petticoats, wherein she had, with some foresight, concealed 80 pounds of gunpowder and 40 pounds of roofing nails. What Agnes had also left behind, on the kitchen table beside the note cancelling the milk, was a box and the book. There were specific instructions as to what should be done with the box, and equally specific instructions about what should be done with the book. It was to be sent to Agnes's son, John Device. The people who found it, who were from the next village, and had been woken up by the explosion, considered ignoring the instructions and just burning the cottage, and then looked around at the twinkling fires and nail-studded wreckage and decided not to. Besides, Agnes's note included painfully precise predictions about what would happen to people who did not carry out her orders. The man who put the torch to Agnes Nutter was a witchfinder major. They found his hat in a tree 2 miles away. His name, stitched inside on a fairly large piece of tape, was Thou shalt not commit adultery, Pulsifer, one of England's most assiduous witchfinders, and it might have afforded him some satisfaction to know that his last surviving descendant was now, even if unawares, heading toward Agnes Nutter's last surviving descendant. He might have felt that some ancient revenge was at last going to be discharged. If he'd known what was actually going to happen when he met her, he would have turned in his grave, except that he had never got one. Okay. Well, there you go. End of chapter. Ooh, big stretch. I need to do it. My head's a bit woozy. Oh, there. This grog is bad. Let's hi everybody who came in today. Hello, Sadness and Other Sadness. Sadness and Co. Sadness and Sadness Lawyer Company. Hello, Eisenheim. Hello, everybody. I don't know why I feel like this today. It's weird. It's really cold in my room for some reason too. Huh. Let me take a swig of my caffeine. You can't redeem a dehydrate. It's not there. Don't worry about it. I drink every break I take. It's fine. And it's not like you could actually I could actually see the notification anyway, because I hydrate as I please. Exactly. While we're doing this whole break thing, I shall take a photo of the next fancy little letter. Yes, I will. It is an F. It's got a... What is that? That looks like a little submarine with a frog on it. What in the world is that? Do. Let me take the picture. Look at this thing. F. Look at that frog. The A ribbit. Like a true kingmaker. Mm-hmm. Do. Look at how paper-like this texture looks when like zoomed in on it though. It's really nice, isn't it? I like these e-ink e-books. They're really nice. A darn nice thing indeed, yeah. Archibald's eating. I need to figure out a cheap, good way to feed Archibald his probiotics. Because he's very picky about it. He doesn't want to eat his kibble when there's probiotic powder on it. And he doesn't really finish his wet food fast enough. And then Mira steals it, so maybe I just need to mix it with like his snackies or something again. God dang it, Archibald. Do you know how much those snacks cost? They cost a fortune. Meow. Be like Pandora and just eat everything. Or Mira, who steals your food. Be like Mira, who steals your food and steal your own food, Archibald. Okay, let me just... Actually, you wanna leave? No? Yes? Leave. Let us continue the chapter, and then maybe I can take the break afterwards, like the full-on ad break. Firstly, however, Newt had to do something about the flying saucer. It landed in the road ahead of him just as he was trying to find the lower Tadfield turning and had the map spread over the steering wheel. He had to brake hard. It looked like every cartoon of a flying saucer Newt had ever seen. As he stared over the top of his map, a door in the saucer slid aside with a satisfying whoosh, revealing a gleaming walkway which extended automatically down to the road. Brilliant blue light shone out, outlining 3 alien shapes. They walked down the ramp. At least 2 of them just walked. The one that looked like a pepper pod just skidded down it and fell over at the bottom. The other 2 ignored its frantic beeping and walked over to the car quite slowly. In the worldwide approved manner of policemen already compiling the charge sheet in their heads. The tallest one, a yellow toad dressed in kitchen foil, rapped on Newt's window. He wound it down. The thing was wearing the kind of mirror-finished sunglasses that Newt always thought of as cool hand Luke shades. "Morning, sir, or madam, or neuter," the thing said. "This your planet, is it?" The other alien, which was stubby and green, had wandered off into the woods by the side of the road. Out the corner of his eye, Newt saw it kick a tree and then run a leaf through some complicated gadget on its belt. It didn't look very pleased. "Well, yes, I suppose so," he said. The toad stared thoughtfully at the skyline. "Had it long, have ye, sir?" It said. Not personally, I mean, as a species about, 500,000 years, I think. The alien exchanged glances with its colleague. "Been letting the old acid rain build up, haven't we, sir?" it said. "Been letting ourselves go a bit with the old hydrocarbons, perhaps." I'm sorry? "Could you tell me you're a planet cell beetle, sir?" said the toad, still staring levelly at the horizon as though it was doing something interesting. No. "Well, I'm sorry to have to tell you, sir, that your polar ice caps are below regulation size for a planet of this category, sir." "Oh dear," said Newt. He was wondering who he could tell about this, and realizing that there was absolutely no one who would believe him. The toad bent closer. It seemed to be worried about something. Insofar as Newt was any judge of the expressions of an alien race he'd never encountered before. "We'll overlook it on this occasion, sir." Newt gabbled, I'll see true then. When I say I think I mean I I think Antarctica or something belongs to every country or something, and the fact is, sir, that we have been asked to give you a message. Oh? Message runs. We give you a message of universal peace and cosmic harmony and such like. Message ends, said the Toad. Oh. Newt turned this over in his mind. Oh, that's very kind. Have you got any idea we have been asked to bring you this message, sir? Said the Toad. Newt brightened. Well, I suppose he flailed. Well, mankind's harnessing of the atom, and neither have we, sir, the Toad stood up. One of them phenomena, I expect. Well, we'd better be going. It shook its head vaguely, turned around, and waddled back to the saucer without another word. Newt stuck his head out of the window. Thank you. The small alien walked past the car. CO2 level up 0.5%, it rasped, giving him a meaningful look. You do know you could find yourself charged with being a dominant species while under the influence of impulse-driven consumerism, don't you? The two of them righted the third alien, dragged it back up the ramp, and shut the door. Newt waited for a while in case there were any spectacular light displays, but it just stood there. Eventually he drove up to the verge and around it. Where he looked in his rearview mirror, it had gone. I must be overdoing something, he thought guiltily. But what? And I can't even tell Shadwell because he'd probably bawl me out for not counting their nipples. Anyway, said Adam, you got it all wrong about witches. The them were sitting on a field gate, watching dog rolling in cowpats. The little mongrel seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. I've been reading about them, he said, in a slightly louder voice. Actually, they've been right all along about it's wrong to persecute them with British Inquisitions and stuff. My mother said they were just intelligent women protesting in the only way open to them against the stifling injustices of a male-dominated social hierarchy, said Pepper. Pepper's mother lectured at Northern Polytechnic. Footnote saying, during the day. In the evening, she gave power tarot readings to nervous executives because old habits died hard. Yes, but your mother's always saying things like that, said Adam after a while. Pepper nodded amiably, and she said at worst they were just free-thinking worshippers of the progenerative principle. Who's the progenerative principle? Said Wensleydale. Don't know, something to do with maples, I think, said Pepper vaguely. Well, I thought they worshipped the devil, said Brian, without automatic condemnation. The Dem had an open mind on the whole subject of devil worship. The Dem had an open mind about everything. Anyway, the devil would be better than a stupid maypole. That's where you're wrong, said Adam. It's not the devil, it's another god or something, with horns. The devil, said Brian. No, said Adam patiently. People just got him mixed up. He's just got horns similar. He's called Pan. He's half a goat. Which half? Said Wensleydale. Adam thought about it. The bottom half, he said at length. Fancy you not knowing that. I should have thought everyone knew that. Goats haven't got a bottom half, said Wensleydale. They got a front half and a back half. Just like cows. They watched dogs some more, drumming their heels on the gate. It was too hot to think. Then Pepper said, if he's got goat legs, he shouldn't have horns. They belong to the front half. I didn't make him up, did I? Said Adam, aggrieved. I was just telling you, it's news to me I made him up. No need to go on at me. Anyway, said Pepper, this stupid pot can't go around complaining if people think he's the devil. Not with having horns on. People are bound to say, oh, here comes the devil. Dog started to dig up a rabbit hole. Adam, who seemed to have a weight on his mind, took a deep breath. You don't have to be so literal about everything, he said. That's the trouble these days. Grass materialism. People like you who go around chopping down rainforests and making holes in the ozone layer. There's a great big hole in the ozone layer because of grass materialism, people like you. I can't do anything about it, said Brian automatically. I'm still paying off on a stupid cucumber frame. It's in the magazine, said Adam. It takes millions of acres of rainforest to make one beef burger, and all this ozone is leaking away because of... He hesitated. People spraying the environment. And there's the whales, said Wensleydale. We've got to save 'em. Adam looked blank. His splendor of new Aquarians back issues hadn't included anything about whales. Its editors had assumed that the readers were all for saving whales in the same way they assumed they breathed and walked upright. There was this program about them, explained Wensleydale. What have we got to save them for? Said Adam. He had confused visions of saving up whales until he had enough for a badge. Wensleydale paused and racked his memory. Because they can sing, and they got big brains, there's hardly any of them left, and we don't need to kill them anyway because they only make pet food and stuff. If they're so clever, said Brian, slowly, what are they doing in the sea? Oh, I don't know, said Adam, looking thoughtful. Swimming around all day, just opening their mouths and eating stuff. Sounds pretty clever to me. A squeal of brakes and a long drawn-out crunch interrupted him. They scrambled off the gate and ran up the lane to the crossroads where a small car lay on its roof at the end of the long skid mark. A little further down the road was a hole. It looked as though the car had tried to avoid it. As he looked at it, a small oriental-looking head darted out of sight. The dam dragged the door open and pulled out the unconscious Newt. Visions of medals of heroic rescue thronged Adam's head. Practical considerations of first aid thronged around that of Wensleydale. We shouldn't move him, he said. Because of broken bones, we ought to get someone. Adam cast around. There was a rooftop just visible in the trees down the road. It was Jasmine Cottage. And in Jasmine Cottage, an Athema device was sitting in front of a table on which some bandages, aspirins, and assorted first aid items had been laid out for the past hour. And Athema looked at the clock. He'll be coming around any moment now, she thought. He wasn't what she'd been expecting. More precisely, he wasn't what she'd been hoping for. She had been hoping, rather unconsciously, for someone tall, dark, and handsome. Newt was tall, but with a rolled-out, thin look, and while his hair was undoubtedly dark, it wasn't any sort of fashion accessory. It was just a lot of thin, black strands all growing together out of the top of his head. This was not Newt's fault. In his younger days, he would go every couple of months to the barber's shop on the corner, clutching a photograph he'd carefully torn from a magazine which showed someone with an impressively cool haircut grinning at the camera. And he would show the pictures to the barber and ask to be made to look like that, please. And the barber, who knew his job, would take one look and then give Newt the basic all-purpose short back and sides. After a year of this, Newt realized that he obviously didn't have the face that went with the haircuts. The best Newton Pulsifer could hope for after a haircut was shorter hair. It was the same with suits. The clothing hadn't been invented that would make him look suave and sophisticated and comfortable. These days he had learned to be satisfied with anything that would keep the rain off and give him somewhere to keep his change. And he wasn't handsome, not even when he took off his glasses. Footnote saying, actually, less so when he took off his glasses, because then he tripped over things and wore bandages a lot. And she discovered when she took off his shoes to lay him under bed, he wore odd socks. One blue one with a hole in the heel and one gray one with holes around the toes. I suppose I'm meant to feel a wave of warm, tender female something or other about this, she thought. I just wish he'd wash them. So, tall, dark, but not handsome. She shrugged. Okay, 2 out of 3 isn't bad. The figure on the bed began to stir, and Anathema, who in the very nature of things always looked to the future, suppressed her disappointment and said, "How are we feeling now?" Newt opened his eyes. He was lying in a bedroom, and it wasn't his. He knew this instantly because of the ceiling. His bedroom ceiling still had the model aircraft hanging from bits of cotton. He'd never got around to taking them down. The ceiling just had cracked plaster. Newt had never been in a woman's bedroom before, but he sensed that this was one largely by a combination of soft smells. There was a hint of talcum and lily of the valley, and no rank suggestion of old t-shirts that had forgotten what the inside of a tumble dryer looked like. He tried to lift his head up, groaned, and let it sink back onto the pillow. Pink, he couldn't help noticing. "You banged your head on the steering wheel," said the voice that had roused him. "Nothing broken, though. What happened?" Newt opened his eyes again. Car all right?" he said. "Apparently," a little voice inside it keeps repeating, "please to fasten sleet belts." "See?" said Newt to an invisible audience. "They knew how to build them in those days. That plastic finish hardly takes a dent." He blinked at Anathema. "I swerved to avoid a Tibetan on the road," he said. "At least, I think I did. I think I probably got mad." The figure walked around into his line of sight. It had dark hair and red lips and green eyes, and it was almost certainly female. Newt tried not to scare. If it said, "If you have, no one's going to notice." Then she smiled. "Do you know, I've never met a witchfinder before." Newt began. She held up his open wallet. "I had to look inside," she said. Newt felt extremely embarrassed. A not unusual state of affairs. Shadwell had given him an official witchfinder's warrant card, which among other things charged all beadles, magistrates, bishops, and bailiffs to give him free passage and as much dry kindling as he required. It was incredibly impressive, a masterpiece of calligraphy, and probably quite old. He'd forgotten about it. "It's really just a hobby," he said wretchedly. "I'm not really, he wasn't going to say wages clerk. Not here. Not now. Not to a girl like this. I'm really a computer engineer," he lied. Want to be. Want to be. In my heart, I'm a computer engineer. It's only the brain that's letting me down." "Excuse me, could I know—" "Anathema device," said Anathema. "I'm an occultist, but that's just a hobby. I'm really a witch." "Well done. You run half an hour late," she added, handing him a small sheet of cardboard. "So you'd better read this. It'll save a lot of time." Newt did in fact own a small home computer. Despite his boyhood experiences. In fact, he'd owned several. He always knew which ones he owned. They were desktop equivalents of the Wasabi. They were the ones which, for example, dropped to half price just after he'd bought them, or were launched in a blaze of publicity and disappeared into obscurity within a year, or only worked at all if you stuck them in a fridge, or if by some fluke they were basically good machines. Newt always got the few that were sold with the early bug-infested version of the operating system. But he persevered because he believed. Adam also had a small computer. He used it for playing games, but never for very long. He'd load a game, watch it intently for a few minutes, and then proceed to play it until the high score counter ran out of zeros. Then the other them wondered about this strange skill. Adam professed mild amazement that everyone didn't play games like this. "All you have to do is learn how to play it, and then it's just easy," he said. Quite a lot of the front parlor in Jasmine Cottage was taken up. Newt noticed with a sinking feeling which piles of newspapers. Clippings were stuck around the walls. Some of them had been circled in red ink. He was mildly gratified to spot several he had cut out for Shadwell. Anathema owned very little in the way of furniture. The only thing she'd bothered to bring with her had been her clock, one of the family heirlooms. It wasn't a full-case grandfather clock, but a wall clock with a free-swinging pendulum that E.A. Poe would cheerfully have strapped someone under. Newt kept finding his eye drawn to it. It was built by an ancestor of mine, said Anathema, putting the coffee cups down on the table. Sir Joshua Adam also had a small computer. Wait. Sir Joshua Device. My brain. You may have heard of him. He invented the little rocking thing that made it possible to build accurate clocks cheaply. They named it after him. The Joshua? Said Newt guardedly. The device. Or the device. The device. In the last half hour, Newt had heard some pretty unbelievable stuff that was close to believing it, but you have to draw the line somewhere. The device is named after a real person? He said. Oh yes, fine old Lancashire name. From the French, I believe. You'll be telling me next you've never heard of Sir Humphrey Gadget. Oh now, come on! Who devised the gadget that made it possible to pump out flooded mineshafts? Or Pieter Gizmo? Or Cyrus T. Doodad, America's foremost black inventor? Thomas Edison said that the only other contemporary practical scientists he admired were Cyrus T. Doodad and Ella Reader Widget, and, she looked at Newt's blank expression. I did my PhD on them, she said. The people who invented things so simple and universally useful that everyone forgot that they'd ever actually needed to be invented. Sugar? You normally have two, Anathema said. Sweetly. Newt stared back at the card she'd handed him. She seemed to think it would explain everything. It didn't. It had a ruled line down the middle. On the left-hand side was a short piece of what seemed to be poetry in black ink. On the right-hand side, in red ink this time, were comments and annotations. The effect was as follows. On the left. When Orion's chariot inverted be, 4 wheels in the sky, a man with bruises be upon your bed, a hinge his headeth for willow fine, a man who tested with a pine, yet his heart be clean, yet seed of mine own undoing. Take this means of flame from him for to mark right certain, together ye shall be until the end that is to come. On the right, Japanese car, upturned, car smash, not serious injury, taken. Willow fine equals aspirin, CF 3757. Pin equals witchfinder, CF 102. Good witchfinder refers to Pulsifer, CF 002. Search for matches, etc. In the 1990s. Less than a day. CF 712-3803-4004. Newt's hand went automatically to his pocket. His cigarette lighter had gone. What's this mean? He said hoarsely. Have you ever heard of Agnes Nutter? Said Anathema. No, said Newt, taking a desperate defense in sarcasm. You're going to tell me she invented mad people, I suppose. Another fine old Lancashire name, said Anathema coldly. If you don't believe, read up on the witch trials of the early 17th century. She was an ancestress of mine, as a matter of fact. One of your ancestors burned her alive, or tried to. Newt listened in fascinated horror to the story of Agnes Nutter's death. Thou shalt not commit adultery, Pulsifer, he said, when she'd finished. That sort of name was quite common in those days, said Anathema. Apparently there were 10 children, and they were a very religious family. There was covetousness Pulsifer, false witness Pulsifer. I think I understand, said Newt. Gosh, I thought Shadwell said he'd heard the name before. It must be in the army records. I suppose if I'd gone around being called adultery Pulsifer, I'd want to hunt as many people as possible. I think he just didn't like women very much. Thanks for taking it so well, said Newt. I mean, he must have been an ancestor. There aren't many Pulsifers. Maybe that's why I sort of met up with the Witchfinder army? Could be fate, he said hopefully. She shook her head. No, she said. No such thing. Anyway, witch-finding isn't like it was in those days. I don't think even old Shadwell's ever done more than kick over Doris Stokes' dustbins. Between you and me, Agnes was a bit of a difficult character, said Anathema, vaguely. She had no middle gears. Newt waved the bit of paper. But what's it got to do with this? He said. She wrote it. Well, the original. It's number 3819 of the Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter, first published 1655. Newt stared at the prophecy again, his mouth opened and shut. Even. She knew I'd crashed my car? He said. Yes. Well, no, probably not. It's hard to say. You see, Agnes was the worst prophet that's ever existed because she was always right. That's why the book never sold. Story time. Yep, end of chapter. It's okay, Minnie. Don't worry about it. I tried muting it myself in the dashboard because it said 0 mutes left on the actual button on the chat for some reason, and I clicked it and it didn't snooze. So even if you did snooze, Minnie, it wouldn't have worked apparently. So thanks, Twitchy bitch. Hi, Kixie, how you doing? It is story time, indeed. And now I really don't want to take another ad break, so I suppose we'll just read through this. This is a 43-minute long chapter, so I have about enough to read through this chapter entirely in its wholeness before I need to take another ad break. This is the M. Look at it. It's some sort of maiden with a sneaker in her hand. Or something. A ginormous sneaker. Anyway, I need to chug more calf. Chuggaree, chuggaroo. I gotta continue. Most psychic abilities are caused by a simple lack of temporal focus, and the mind of Agnes Nutter was so far adrift in time that she was considered pretty mad, even by the standards of 17th century Lancashire, where mad prophetesses were a gross industry. But she was a treat to listen to, everyone agreed. She used to go on about curing illnesses by using a sort of mold, and the importance of washing your hands so that the tiny little animals who cause diseases would be washed away, when every sensible person knew that a good stink was the only defense against the demons of ill health. She advocated running at a sort of a gentle bouncing trot as an aid to living longer, which was extremely suspicious and first put the witchfinders onto her, and stressed the importance of fiber in diet, although here she was clearly ahead of her time, since most people were less bothered about the fiber in their diet than the gravel. And she wouldn't cure warts. It is all in your mind, she'd say. Forget about it, and it will go away. It was obvious that Agnes had a line to the future, but it was an unusually narrow and specific line. In other words, almost totally useless. How do you mean? Said Newt. She managed to come up with the kind of predictions that you can only understand after the thing has happened, said Anathema. Like, do not buy a Betamax. That was a prediction for 1972. You mean she predicted videotape recorders? No, she just predicted, she picked up one little fragment of information, said Anathema. That's the point. Most of the time she comes up with such an oblique reference that you can't work it out until it's gone past, and then it all slots into place. and she didn't know what was going on should be important or not, so it's all a bit hit and miss. Her prediction for November 22nd, 1963 was about a house falling down in King's Lynn. Oh? Newt looked politely blank. President Kennedy was assassinated, said Anathema helpfully. But Dallas didn't exist then, you see, whereas King's Lynn was quite important. Oh. She was generally very good if her descendants were involved. Oh? And she wouldn't know anything about the internal combustion engine. To her, they were just funny chariots. Even my mother thought it referred to an emperor's carriage returning. You see, it's not enough to know what the future is. You have to know what it means. Agnes was like someone looking at a huge picture down a tiny little tube. She wrote down what seemed like a good advice based on what she understood of the tiny little glimpses. Sometimes you can be lucky, Anathema went on. My great-grandfather worked out about the stock market crash of 1929, for example, 2 days before it actually happened. Made a fortune. You could say we're professional descendants. She looked sharply at Newt. You see, what no one ever realized until about 200 years ago was that the nice and accurate prophecies was Agnes's idea of a family heirloom. Many of the prophecies relate to her descendants and their well-being. She was sort of trying to look after us after she'd gone. And that's the reason for the King's Lynn prophecy, we think. My father was visiting there at the time, so from Agnes's point of view, while he was unlikely to be struck by stray rounds from Dallas, there was a good chance he might be hit by a brick. What a nice person, said Newt. You could almost overlook her blowing up an entire village. Anathema ignored this. Anyway, that's about it, she said. Ever since then, we made it our job to interpret them. After all, it averages out at about one prophecy a month. More now, in fact, as we get closer to the end of the world. And when is that going to be? Said Newt. Anathema looked meaningfully at the clock. He gave a horrible little laugh that he hoped sounded suave and worldly. After the events so far today, he wasn't feeling very sane, and he could smell Anathema's perfume, which made him uncomfortable. Think yourself lucky I don't need a stopwatch, said Anathema. We've got, 5 or 6 hours? Newt turned this over in his mind. Thus far in his life he'd never had the urge to drink alcohol, but something told him there had to be a first time. Do witches keep drink in the house? He ventured. Oh yes, she smiled, the sort of smile Agnes Nutter probably smiled when unpacking the contents of her lingerie drawer. Green bubbly stuff with strange things squirming on the congealing surface. You should know that. Fine. Got any ice? It turned out to be gin. There was ice. Anathema, who had picked up witchcraft as she went along, disapproved of liquor in general, but approved of it in her specific case. Did I tell you about the Tibetan coming out of a hole in the road? Newt said, relaxing a bit. Oh, I know about them, she said, shuffling the papers on the table. The 2 of them came out of the front lawn yesterday. The poor things were quite bewildered, so I gave them a cup of tea, and then they borrowed a spade and went down again. I don't think they quite know what they're supposed to be doing. Newt felt slightly aggrieved. How did you know they were Tibetan? He said. If it comes to that, how did you know? Did he go, when you hit him? Well, he looked Tibetan, said Newt. Saffron robes, bald head, you know. Tibetan. One of mine spoke quite good English. It seems that 1 minute he was repairing radios in Lhasa. Next minute he was in a tunnel. He doesn't know how he's going to get home. If you'd sent him up the road, he could probably have got a lift on a flying saucer, said Newt gloomily. 3 aliens? One of them a little tin robot? They landed on your lawn too, did they? It's about the only place they didn't land, according to the radio. They keep coming down all over the world, delivering a short threat message of cosmic peace, and when people say, yes, well, they give them a blank look and take off again. Science importance, just like Agnes said. You're going to tell me she predicted all this too, I suppose. Agnes leafed through a battered card index in front of her. I kept meaning to put all this on a computer, she said. Word searches and so forth, you know. It'd make it a lot simpler. The prophecies are arranged in any old order, but there are clues, handwriting, and so on. She did it all in a card index? Said Newt. No, a book, but I've mislaid it. We've always had copies, of course. Lost it, said Newt, trying to inject some humor into the proceedings. Bet she didn't foresee that. Anathema glowered at him. If looks could kill, Newt would have been on a slab. Then she went on. We built up quite a concordance over the years, though, and my grandfather came up with a useful cross-referencing system. Ah, here we are. She pushed a sheet of paper in front of Newt. On the left it says, 3988. When men of Crocus come from the earth and green men from the sky, yet can know why, and Pluto's bears quiet the lightning castles, and sunken lands riseth, and Leviathan runneth free, and Brazil is vert, then three cometh together, and Thor arise, upon iron horses ride. I tell you, the end draweth nigh. Crocus equals saffron. Aliens? Question mark? Paratroops? Nuclear power stations. Sea cuttings. Numbers 798-806. Atlantis. Cuttings 812 to 819. Leviathan equals whale. South America is green? 3 equals 4. Railways? Iron Road. I didn't get all this in advance, Anathema admitted. I filled it in after listening to the news. You must be incredibly good at crosswords in your family, said Newt. I think Agnes is getting a bit out of her depth here, anyway. The bits about Leviathan and South America and 3s and 4s could mean anything, she sighed. The problem is newspapers. You never know if Agnes is referring to some tiny little incident that you might miss. Do you know how long it takes to go through every daily paper thoroughly every morning? 3 hours and 10 minutes, said Newt automatically. I expect we'll get a medal or something, said Adam optimistically. Rescuing a man from a blazing wreck? It wasn't blazing, said Pepper. It wasn't even very wrecked when we put it back right side up. It could have been, Adam pointed out. I don't see why we shouldn't have a medal just because some old car doesn't know when to catch fire. They stood looking down at the hole. Anathema had called the police, who had put it down to subsidence and put some cones around it. It was dark and went down a long way. Could be good fun going to Tibet, said Brian. We could learn martial arts and stuff. I saw this old film where there is this valley in Tibet and everyone there lives for hundreds of years. It's called Shangri-La. My aunt's bungalow is called Shangri-La, said Wensleydale. Adam snorted. Not very clever naming a valley after some old bungalow, he said. Might as well call it Dun Roman or the Laurels. Slot better than Shambles, anyway, said Wensleydale mildly. Shambhala, corrected Adam. I expect it's the same place. Probably got both names, said Pepper, with unusual diplomacy. Like our house. We changed the name from the Lodge to Northern View when we moved in, but we still get letters addressed to Theo C. Cupier, the Lodge, because they've named it Shambhala, but now people could still call it the Laurels. Adam flicked a pebble into the hole. He was becoming bored with Tibetans. What shall we do now? Said Pepper. They're dipping sheep over at Northern Bottom Farm. We could go and help. Adam threw a larger stone into the hole and waited for the thump. It didn't come. I don't know, he said distantly. I reckon we should do something about whales and forests and such like. Like what? Said Brian, who enjoyed the diversions available at a good sheep dipping. He began to empty his pockets of crisp packets and drop them one by one into the hole. We could go into Tadfield this afternoon and not have a hamburger, said Pepper. If all 4 of us don't have one, that's millions of acres of rainforest they won't have to cut down. They'll be cutting them out anyway, said Wensleydale. It's grass materialism again, said Adam. Same with the whales. It's amazing, the stuff that's going on. He stared at Dog. He was feeling very odd. The little mongrel, noticing the attention, balanced expectantly on its hind legs. Suppose people like you that's eating all the whales, said Adam severely. I bet you've used up nearly a whole whale already. Dog, one last tiny satanic spark of his soul hating himself for it, put his head on one side and whined. It's gonna be a fine old world to grow up in, Adam said. No whales, no air, and everyone paddling around because the sea is rising. Then the Atlanteans, the only ones well off, said Pepper cheerfully. Huh, said Adam, not really listening. Something was happening inside his head. It was aching. Thoughts were arriving there without him having to think them. Something was saying, you can do something, Adam Young. You can make it all better. You can do anything you want. And what was saying this to him was him. Part of him deep down. Part of him that had been attached to him all these years and not really noticed, like a shadow. It was saying, yes, it's a rotten world. It could have been great, but now it's rotten, and it's time to do something about it. That's what you're here for, to make it all better. Because they'd be able to go everywhere, Pepper went on, giving him a worried look. The Atlanteans, I mean, because... I'm fed up with the old Atlanteans and Tibetans, snapped Adam. They stared at him. They'd never seen him like this before. It's all very well for them, said Adam. Everyone's going around using up all the whales and coal and oil and ozone and rainforests and that, and there'll be none less for us. We should be going to Mars and stuff instead of sitting around in the dark and wet with the air spilling away. This wasn't the old Adam that them knew. The them avoided one another's faces. With Adam in this mood, the world seemed a chillier place. Seems to me, said Adam pragmatically, seems to me the best thing you could do about it is to stop reading about it. It's like you said the other day, said Adam. You grow up reading about pirates and cowboys and spacemen and stuff, and just when you think the world's about all full of amazing things, they tell you it's really all dead whales and chopped down forests and nuclear waste hanging about millions of years. It's not worth growing up for, if you ask my opinion. The them exchanged glances. There was a shadow over the whole world. Storm clouds were building up in the north, the sunlight glowing yellow off them as though the sky had been painted by an enthusiastic amateur. Seems to me it ought to be rolled up and started all over again, said Adam. That hasn't sounded like Adam's voice. A bitter wind blew through the summer woods. Adam looked at Dog, who tried to stand on its head. There was a distant mutter of thunder. He reached down and patted the dog absentmindedly. Serve everyone right if all the nuclear bombs went off and it all started again. Only properly organized, said Adam. Sometimes I think that's what I'd like to happen, and then we could sort everything out. The thunder growled again. Pepper shivered. This wasn't a normal dem Mobius bickering, which passed many a slow hour. There was a look in Adam's eye that his friend couldn't quite fathom. Not devilment, because that was more or less there all the time, but a sort of blank grayness that was far worse. Well, I don't know about we, Pepper tried. Don't know about the we, because if there's all these bombs going off, we all get blown up. Speaking as a mother of unborn generations, I'm against it. They looked at her curiously. She shrugged. And then the giant ants take over the world, said Wensleydale nervously. I saw this film, or you go around with a sawn-off shotguns and everyone's got these cars with, knives and guns stuck on. I wouldn't allow any giant ants or anything like that, said Adam, brightening up horribly. And you'd all be all right. I'd see to that. It'd be wicked to have all the world to ourselves, wouldn't it? We could share it out. We could have amazing games. We could have war with real armies and stuff. But there wouldn't be any people, said Pepper. Oh, I could make us some people, said Adam airily. Good enough for armies at any rate. We could all have a quarter of the world each. Like you, he pointed to Pepper, who recoiled as though Adam's finger were a white-hot poker, could have Russia because it's red and you've got red hair, right? And Wensley can have America, and Brian can have Africa and Europe, and then... Even in their state of mounting terror, the dam gave this the consideration it deserved. Stuttered Pepper as the rising wind whipped at her t-shirt. I don't see why Wensley's got America and all I've got is just Russia. Russia's boring. You can have China and Japan and India, said Adam. That just means I've got just Africa and a lot of just boring little countries, said Brian, negotiating on the curl of the catastrophe curve. I wouldn't mind Australia, he added. Pepper nudged him and shook her head urgently. Dog's going to have Australia, said Adam, his eyes glowing with the fires of creation, on account of him needing a lot of space to run about. And there's all those rabbits and kangaroos for him to chase, and... The clouds spread forwards and sideways like ink poured into a bowl of clear water, moving across the sky faster than the wind. But there won't be any rabbits, Wensleydale shrieked. Adam wasn't listening, at least to any voices outside of his own head. It's all too much of a mess, he said. We should start again. Just save the ones we want and start again. That's the best way. It would be doing the earth a favor. When you come to think about it, it makes me angry seeing the way these old loonies are messing it up. It's memory, you see, said Anathema. It works backwards as well as forwards. Racial memory, I mean. Newt gave her a polite but blank look. What I'm trying to say, she said patiently, is that Agnes didn't see the future. That's just a metaphor. She remembered it, of course, and by the time it had been filtered through her own understanding, it's often a bit confused. We think she's best at remembering things that are going to happen to her descendants. But if you're going to places and doing things because of what she wrote, and what she wrote is a recollection of the places you went to and the things you did, said Newt, then... I know, but there's some evidence that that's how it works, said Anathema. They looked at the map spread out between them. Beside them, the radio murmured. Newt was very aware that the woman was sitting next to him. Be professional, he told himself. You're a soldier, aren't you? Well, practically. Then act like a soldier. He thought hard for a fraction of a second. Well, act like a respectable soldier on his best behavior, then. He forced his attention back to the matter at hand. Why Lower Tadfield, said Newt. I just got interested because the weather. Optimal microclimate, they call it. That means it's a small place with its own personalized weather. He glanced at her notebooks. There was definitely something odd about the place, even if you ignored Tibetans and UFOs, which seem to be infesting the whole world these days. The Tadfield area didn't only have the kind of weather you could set your calendar by, it was also remarkably resistant to change. No one seemed to build new houses there. The population didn't seem to move much. There seemed to be more woods and hedges than you'd normally expect these days. The only battery farm to open in the area had failed after a year or two, and been replaced by an old-fashioned pig farmer who let his pigs run loose in his apple orchards, and sold the pork at premium prices. The 2 local schools seemed to soldier on in blissful immunity from the changing fashions of education. A motorway which should have turned most of Lower Tadfield into little more than a Junction 18 happy porker rest area, changed course 5 miles away, detoured in a great semicircle, and continued on its way oblivious to the little island of rural changelessness it had avoided. No one quite seemed to know why. One of the surveyors involved had a nervous breakdown, a second had become a monk, and a third had gone off to Bali to paint nude women. It was as if a large part of the 20th century had marked a few square miles out of bounds. Anathema pulled another card out of her index and flicked it across the table. Number 2315. Some say it cometh in London town, or New York, But they be wrong, for the place is Tadd's field, strong in his power. He cometh like a knight in the fief. He divideth the world into 4 parts. He bringeth the storm. On the right it says, 4 years early, New Amsterdam till 1664. Tadville, Norfolk. Tardesfield, Devon. Tadfield, Oxon. See Revelation, C6, V10. I had to go and look through a lot of country records, said Anathema. Why is this one 2315? It's earlier than the others. Agnes was a bit slapdash about timing. I don't think she always knew what went where. I told you, we've spent ages devising a sort of system for chaining them together. Newt looked at a few cards. For example, number 1111. And the great hound shall come, and the pale powers shall watch in vain, for it goeth where its master. Where is its master? Where they wot not, and he shall name it. Truth is nature, and hell shall flee it. Is this something to do with Bismarck? AF devised June 8th, 1888. Schleswig-Holstein? She's being unusually obtuse for Agnes, said Anathema. And the great hound shall come, and the true power shall watch in vain, for it grows where its master where is its master, where they wot not, and he shall name it through its nature, and hell shall flee it. Okay, let's continue. Number 3017. I see 4 riding, bringing the end, and the angels of hell ride with them, and 3 shall rise, and 4 together before, and the dark angel shall own defeat, yet the man shall claim his own. The apocalyptic horseman, the man equals Pan, the devil, the witch trials of Lancashire, Brewster, 1782. Question mark? I feel good and Agnes had drunk well into this night. Quincy Device, October 15, 1789. I concur. We are all human, alas. Miss O.J. Device, January 5th, 1854. Why nice and accurate, said Newt. Nice as in exact or precise, said Anathema, in the weary tones of one who'd explained this before. That's what it used to mean. But look, said Newt. He'd nearly convinced himself about the non-existence of the UFO, which was clearly a figment of his imagination, and the Tibetan who could have been well, he was working on it, but whatever it wasn't a Tibetan. But what he was more and more convinced of was that he was in a room with a very attractive woman who appeared actually to like him, or at least not to dislike him, which was a definite first for Newt. And admittedly, there seemed to be a lot of strange stuff going on. But if he really tried, polling the boat of common sense upstream against the raging current of the evidence, he could pretend it was all, well, weather balloons, or Venus, or mass hallucination. In short, whatever Newt was now thinking with, it wasn't his brain. But look, he said, the world isn't really going Shen now, is it? I mean, just look around. It's not like there's any international tension. Well, any more than there normally is. Why don't we leave this stuff for a while and just go and, I don't know, maybe we could just go for a walk or something? I mean, don't you understand? There's something here. Something that affects the area, she said. It's twisted all the ley lines. It's protecting the area against anything that might change it. It's... Here it was again. The thought in her mind that she was not allowed to grasp, like a dream upon waking. The windows rattled. Outside, a sprig of jasmine, driven by the wind, started to bang insistently on the glass. But I can't get a fix on it, said Anathema, twisting her fingers together. I've tried everything. Fix, said Newt. I've tried the pendulum. I've tried the theodolite. I'm psychic, you see. but it seemed to move around. Newt was still in control of his own mind enough to do the proper translation. When most people said, "I'm psychic, you see," they meant, "I have an overactive, imagination. I have an overactive but unoriginal imagination where black nail varnish talked to my budgie." When Anathema said it, it sounded as though she was admitting to a hereditary disease which she'd much prefer not to have. "Armageddon moves around?" said Newt. "Various prophecies say the Antichrist has to arise first," said Anathema. "Agnes says he. I can't spot him." "Or her," said Newt. "What?" "Could be a her," said Newt. "This is the 20th century, after all. Equal opportunities." "I don't think you're taking this entirely seriously," she said severely. "Anyway, there isn't any evil here. That's what I don't understand. There's love." "Sorry?" said Newt. She gave him a helpless look. "It's hard to describe it," she said. "Something or someone loves this place. Loves every inch of it so powerfully that it shields and protects it. A deep down huge, fierce love. How can anything bad start here? How can the end of the world start in a place like this? This is the kind of town you'd want to raise your kids in. It's a kid's paradise." She smiled weakly. "You should see the local kids. They're unreal. Right out of the boys' own paper. All scabby knees and brilliant. And bullseyes." She nearly had it. She could feel the shape of the thought. She was gaining on it. "What's this place?" said Newt. "What?" Anathema screamed as her train of thought was derailed. Newt's finger tapped at the map. "Disused aerodrome. It says, just here, look, west of Tadfield itself." Anathema snorted. "Disused? Don't you believe it? Used to be a wartime fighter base. It's been Upper Tadfield Air Base for about 10 years or so, and before you say it, the answer is no. I hate everything about the bloody place. But the colonel is saner than you are by a long way. His wife does yoga, for God's sake." Now, what was it she'd said before? The kids around here. She felt her mental feet slipping away from under her, and she fell back into the more personal thought waiting there to catch her. Newt was okay, really. And the thing about spending the rest of your life with him was, he wouldn't be around long enough to get on your nerves. The radio was talking about South American rainforests. New ones. It began to hail. Bullets of ice shredded the leaves around the stem as Adam led them down into the quarry. Dog slunk along with his tail between his legs, whining. This wasn't right. He was thinking. Just when I was getting the hang of rats. Just when I'd nearly sorted out that bloody German shepherd across the road. Now he's going to end it all, and I'll be back with the old glowing eyes and chasing lost souls. What's the sense in that? They don't fight back, and there's no taste to them. Wensleydale, Brian, and Pepper were not thinking quite so coherently. All that they were aware of was that they could no more not follow Adam than fly. To try to resist the force marching them forward would simply result in multiple broken legs, and they'd still have to march. Adam wasn't thinking at all. Something had opened in his mind and was aflame. He sat them down on the crate. We'll all be all right down here," he said. Said Wensleydale. "Don't you think our mothers and fathers—" "Don't you worry about them," said Adam loftily. "I can make some new ones. There won't be any of this being in bed by 9:30 either. You don't ever have to go to bed ever, if you don't have to, or tidy your room or anything. You just leave it all to me and it will be great." He gave them a manic smile. "I've got some new friends coming," he confided. "You'll like 'em." "But," said Wensleydale began. "You just think of all the amazing stuff afterwards," said Adam enthusiastically. You can fill up America with all new cowboys and Indians and policemen and gangsters and cartoons and spacemen and stuff. Won't that be fantastic? Wensleydale looked miserably at the other two. They were sharing a thought that none of them would be able to articulate very satisfactorily, even in normal times. Broadly, it was that there had once been real cowboys and gangsters, and that was great. And there would always be pretend cowboys and gangsters, and that was also great. But real pretend cowboys and gangsters that were alive and not alive and could be put back in their box when you were tired of them, this did not seem great at all. The whole point about gangsters and cowboys and aliens and pirates was that you could stop being them and go home. But before all that, said Adam darkly, we're really going to show 'em. There was a tree in the plaza. It wasn't very big, and the leaves were yellow, and the light it got through the excitingly dramatic smoked glass was the wrong sort of light. And it was on more drugs than an Olympic athlete, and loudspeakers nested in the branches. But it was a tree, and if you half closed your eyes and looked at it over the artificial waterfall, you could almost believe that you were looking at a sick tree through a fog of tears. Jaime Hernandez liked to have his lunch under it. The maintenance supervisor would shout at him if he found out, but Jaime had grown up on a farm, and it had been quite a good farm, and he had liked trees and he didn't want to have to come into the city. But what could you do? It wasn't a bad job, and the money was the kind of money his father hadn't dreamed of. His grandfather hadn't dreamed of any money at all. He hadn't known what money was until he was 15. But there were times when you needed trees, and the shame of it, Chaim thought, was that his children were growing up thinking of trees as firewood, and his grandchildren would think of trees as history. But what could you do? Where there were trees, now there were big farms. Where there were small farms, now there were plazas. And where there were plazas, there were still plazas. And that's how it went. He hid this trolley behind the newspaper stand, sat down furtively, and opened his lunchbox. It was then that he became aware of the rustling and the movement of shadows across the floor. He looked around. The tree was moving. He watched it with interest. Chaim had never seen a tree growing before. The soil, which was nothing more than a scree of some sort of artificial chippings, was actually crawling as the roots moved around under the surface. Chaim saw a thin white shoot creep down the side of the raised garden area and prod blindly at the concrete of the floor. Without ever knowing why, he nudged it gently with his foot until it was close to the crack between the slabs. It found it and bore down. The branches were twisting into different shapes. Chaim heard the screech of traffic outside the building, but didn't pay it any attention. Someone was yelling something, but someone was always yelling in Chaim's vicinity, often at him. The questing root must have found the buried soil. It changed color and thickened, like a fire hose when the water turned on. The artificial waterfall stopped running. Chaim visualized fractured pipes blocked with sucking fibers. Now he could see what was happening outside. The street surface was heaving like a sea. Saplings were pushing up between the cracks. Of course, he reasoned, they had sunlight. His tree didn't. All it had was the muted gray light that came through the dome 4 stories up. Dead light. But what could you do? You could do this. The lights had stopped running because the power was off. But it was only 4 flights of stairs. Chaim carefully shut his lunchbox and padded back to his cart, where he selected his longest broom. People were pouring out of the building, yelling. Chaim moved amiably against the flow like a salmon going upstream. A white framework of girders, which the architect had presumably thought made a dynamic statement about something or other, held up the smoked glass dome. In fact, it was some sort of plastic, and it took Chaim, perched on a convenient strip of girder, all his strength and the full leverage of the broom's length to crack it. A couple of more swings brought it down in lethal shards. The light poured in, lighting up the dust in the plaza so that the air looked as though it was full of fireflies. Far below, the tree burst the walls of its brushed concrete prison and rose like an express train. Jaime had never realized that the trees made a sound when they grew, and no one else had realized it either, because the sound is made over hundreds of years in waves of 24 hours from peak to peak. Speed it up, and the sound the tree makes is vroom. Jaime watched it come towards him like a green mushroom cloud. Steam was billowing out from across its roots. The girders never stood a chance. The remnant of the dome went out like a ping-pong ball on a water spray. It was the same over all the city, except that you couldn't see the city anymore. All you could see was a canopy of green. It stretched from horizon to horizon. Jaime sat on his branch, clung to a liana, and laughed and laughed and laughed. Presently, it began to rain. The Kapamaki, a whaling research ship, was currently researching the question, how many whales can you catch in 1 week? Except that today there weren't any whales. The crew stared at the screens, which by the application of ingenious technology could spot anything larger than a sardine and calculate its net value on the international oil market, and found them blank. The occasional fish that did not show up was battling through the water as if in a great hurry to get elsewhere. The captain drummed his fingers on the console. He was afraid that he might soon be conducting his own research project to find out what happened to a statistically small sample of whaler captains who came back without a factory ship full of research material. He wondered what they did to you. Maybe they locked you in a room with a harpoon gun and expected you to do the honorable thing. This was unreal. There ought to be something. The navigator punched up a chart and stared at it. Honorable sir, he said. What is it? Said the captain testily. We seem to have a miserable instrument failure. Seabed in this area should be 200 meters. What of it? I'm reading 1,500 meters, honorable sir, and still falling. That is foolish. There is no such depth. The captain glared at several million yens worth of cutting-edge technology and thumped it. The navigator gave a nervous smile. Ah, sir, he said. It is shallower already. Beneath the thunders of the upper deep, as Aziraphale and Tennyson both knew, far, far beneath in the abyssal sea, the kraken sleepeth. And now it was waking up. Millions of tons of deep ocean ooze cascade off its flanks as it rises. See? Said the navigator. 3,000 meters already. The kraken doesn't have eyes. 3,000 meters... There has never been anything for it to look at, but as it billows up through the icy waters, it picks up the microwave noise of the sea. The soaring beeps and whistles of the whale song. Said the navigator. 1,000 meters? The kraken is not amused. 500 meters? The factory ship rocks on the sudden swell. 100 meters? There is a tiny metal thing above it. The kraken stirs. And 10 billion sushi dinners cry out for vengeance. The cottage windows burst inward. This wasn't a storm. It was war. Fragments of jasmine whirled across the room, mingled with the rain of file cards. Newt and Anathema clung to one another in the space between the overturned table and the wall. Go on, muttered Newt. Tell me Agnes predicted this. She did say he bringeth the storm, said Anathema. This is a bloody hurricane. Did she say what's supposed to happen next? 2315 is Clark's reference to 3477, said Anathema. You can remember details like that at a time like this? Since you mention it, yes, she said. She held out a card. 3477. Let the wheel of fate turn. Let hearts enjoin. There are other fires than mine. When the wind bloweth the blossoms, reach out one to another, for the calm cometh when red and white and black and pale approach to peace, is our profession. Some mysticism here. One fears. AF device, October 17th, 1889. Peas? Blossoms? OFD, 1929, September 4th. Revelation chapter 6 again, I presume. Dr. Taw's device, 1835. Newt read it again. There was a sound outside like a sheet of corrugated iron pinwheeling across the garden, which was exactly what it was. Is this supposed to mean, he said slowly, that we're supposed to become, an item? That Agnes? What a joker. Courting is always difficult when the one being courted has an elderly female relative in the house. They tend to mutter or cackle or bum cigarettes, or, in the worst cases, get out the family photograph album. An act of aggression in the sex war which ought to be banned by a Geneva Convention. It's much worse when the relative has been dead for 300 years. Newt had indeed been harboring certain thoughts about anathema. Not just harboring them, in fact, but dry-docking them, refitting them, giving them a good coat of paint and scraping the barnacles off their bottom. But the idea of Agnes's second side boring into the back of his neck sloshed over his libido like a bucket of cold water. He had even been entertaining the idea of inviting her out for a meal, but he hated the idea of some Cromwellian witch sitting in her cottage 3 centuries earlier and watching him eat. He was in the mood in which people burned witches. His life was quite complicated enough without it being manipulated across the centuries by some crazed old woman. A thump in the grate sounded like part of the chimney stack coming down. And then he thought, my life isn't complicated at all. I can see it as clearly as Agnes might. It stretches all the way to early retirement. A whip round from the people in the office. A bright little neat flat somewhere. A neat little empty death. Except now I'm going to die under the ruins of a cottage during what might just possibly be the end of the world. The recording angel won't have any trouble with me. My life must have been dittos on every page for years. I mean, what have I ever really done? I've never robbed a bank. I've never had a parking ticket. I've never eaten Thai food. Somewhere another window caved in, with a merry tinkle of breaking glass. Anathema put her arms around him with a sigh which really didn't sound disappointed at all. I've never been to America or France, because Calais doesn't really count. I've never learned to play a musical instrument. The radio died as the power lines finally gave up. He buried his face in her hair. I've never... There was a pinging sound. Shadwell, who had been bringing the army paybooks up to date, looked up in the middle of signing for Witchfinder's Lance Corporal Smith. It took him a while to notice that the gleam of Newt's pin was no longer on the map. He got down from his stool, muttering under his breath, and searched around on the floor until he found it. He gave it another polish and put it back in Tadfield. He was just signing for Witchfinder Private Table, who got an extra tuppence a year allowance, when there was another ping. He retrieved the pin, glared at it suspiciously, and pushed it so hard into the map that the plaster behind it gave way. Then he went back to the ledgers. There was a ping. This time the pin was several feet from the wall. Shadwell picked it up, examined its point, pushed it into the map, and watched. After about 5 seconds, it shot past his ear. He scrambled for it on the floor, replaced it on the map, and held it there. It moved under his hand. He leaned his weight on it. A tiny thread of smoke curled out of the map. Shadwell gave a whimper and sucked on his fingers as the red-hot pin ricocheted off the opposite wall and smashed the window. It didn't want to be in Tadfield. 10 seconds later, Shadwell was rummaging through the WA's cash box, which yielded a handful of copper, a 10-shilling note, and a small counterfeit coin from the reign of James I, regardless of personal safety. Oh, James the First, even. Regardless of personal safety, he rummaged in his own pockets. The results of the trawl, even with his pensioner's concessionary travel pass taken into consideration, were barely enough to get him out of the house, let alone to Tadfield. The only other people he knew who had money were Mr. Rajit and Madame Tracy. As far as the Rajits were concerned, the question of 7 weeks' rent would probably crop up in any financial discussion he instigated at this point, and asked for Madame Tracy, who'd only be too willing to lend him a handful of used tenors. I'll be swagged if I talk the wages, but I'll be swagged if I'll take the wages of sin from the painted Jezebel, he said. Which left no one else, save one, the southern pansy. They'd each been here just once, spending a little time as possible in the room, and in Aziraphale's case, trying not to touch any flat surface. The other one, the Swish southern bastard in the sunglasses, was, Shadwell suspected, not someone he ought to offend. In Shadwell's simple world, anyone in sunglasses who wasn't actually on the beach was probably a criminal. He suspected that Crowley was from the Mafia, or the underworld, although he would have been surprised how right he nearly was. But the soft one in the camel-hair coat was a different matter, and he'd risked trailing him back to his base once, and he could remember the way. He thought Aziraphale was a Russian spy. He could ask him for money, threaten him a bit. It was terribly risky. Shadwell put himself together. Even now, young Newt might be suffering unimaginable tortures at the hands of the daughter of night, and he, Shadwell, had to send him. "We cannot leave our people in there," he said, and put on his thin overcoat and shapeless hat, and went out into the street. The weather seemed to be blowing a bit. End of chapter. And Archibald wants to bust in. And thus is what I shall do. I shall let him in, I suppose. Archibald, come in. So wait, when exactly are my next ads coming? Because I could read another chapter in this time. A big stretch. It doesn't say how much there is, but I should just take that break. Okay. Because I'm struggling to read a little bit. Out loud, at least. I don't know why my head is feeling all fuzzy right now, but maybe it's the utter terrible sleep I had. I don't know. I'll be right back. And we return. I'm here. Hi. Let me just take a photo of this another ladder here. Oh, oh, it's got a angel or something sitting on a on an A. A, he says, I'm an A. Jill. Look at this. I like these. Aziraphale was dithering. He'd been dithering for some 12 hours. His nerves, he would have said, were all over the place. He walked around the shop, picking up bits of paper and dropping them again, fiddling with pens. He ought to tell Crowley. No, he didn't. He wanted to tell Crowley. He ought to tell Heaven. He was an angel, after all. You had to do the right thing. It was built in. You see a while, you thwart. Crowley had put his finger on it, right enough. He ought to have told Heaven right from the start. But he'd known him for thousands of years. They got along. They nearly understood one another. He sometimes suspected they had far more in common with one another than with their respective superiors. They both liked the world, for one thing, rather than viewed simply as the board on which the cosmic game of chess was being played. Well, of course, that was it. That was the answer, staring him in the face. It'd be too true to the spirit of his pact with Crowley if he tipped Heaven the wink, and then they could quietly do something about the child, although nothing too bad, of course, because we were all God's treasures when you got down to it. Even people like Crowley and the Antichrist, and the world would be saved, and there wouldn't have to be all that Armageddon business, which do nobody any good anyway, because everyone knew Heaven would win in the end, and Crowley would be bound to understand. Yes, and then everything would be alright. There was a knock at the shop door. Despite the closed sign, he ignored it. Getting in touch with heaven for two-way communications was far more difficult for Aziraphale than it is for humans who don't expect an answer and in nearly all cases would be rather surprised to get one. He pushed aside the paper-laden desk and rolled up the threadbare bookshop carpet. There was a small circle chalked on the floorboards underneath, surrounded by suitable passages from the Kabbalah. The angel lit 7 candles, which he placed ritually at certain points around the circle. Then he lit some incense, which was not necessary, but it did make the place smell nice. And then he stood in the circle and said the words. Nothing happened. He said the words again. Eventually, a bright blue shaft of light shot down from the ceiling and filled the circle. A well-educated voice said, "Well, it's me, Aziraphale." "We know," said the voice. "I've got great news. I've located the Antichrist. I can give you his address and everything." There was a pause. The blue light flickered. "Well," it said again, "but DC can stop it all happening in the nick of time. You only got a few hours. You can stop it all, and there's needn't be the war, and everyone will be saved." He beamed madly into the light. "Yes," said the voice. "Yes, he's in a place called Lower Tadfield, and the address." "Well done," said the voice in flat, dead tones. "There doesn't have to be any of that business with 1/3 of the seas turning into blood or anything," said Aziraphale happily. When it came, the voice sounded slightly annoyed. "Why not?" it said. Aziraphale felt an icy pit opening under his enthusiasm, and tried to pretend it wasn't happening. He plunged on. "Well, you can simply make sure that we will win, Aziraphale. Yes, but the force of darkness must be beaten. You seem to be under a misapprehension. The point is not to avoid the war, it is to win it. We have been waiting for a long time, Aziraphale." Aziraphale felt the coldness envelop his mind. He opened his mouth to say, "Do you think perhaps it would be a good idea not to hold the war on Earth?" and changed his mind. "I see," he said grimly. There was a scraping near the door, and if Aziraphale had been looking in that direction, he would have seen a battered felt hat trying to peer over the fanlight. "This is not to say you have not performed well," said the voice. "You will receive a commendation. Well done." "Thank you," said Aziraphale. The bitterness in his voice would have soured milk. "I'd forgotten about ineffability. Obviously. We thought you had." "May I ask," said the angel, "to whom have I been speaking?" The voice said, "We are the Metatron." Footnote saying, "the voice of God," but not the voice of God, an entity in its own right, rather like a presidential spokesman. "Oh, yes, of course. Thank you very much." "Thank you." Behind him, the letterbox tilted open, revealing a pair of eyes. "One other thing," said the voice. "You will, of course, be joining us, won't you?" "Well, of course. It has been simply ages since I've held a flaming sword," Aziraphale began. "Yes, we recall," said the voice. "You will have a lot of opportunity to relearn." What sort of initiating event will precipitate the war?" said Aziraphale. "We thought a multi-nation nuclear exchange would be a nice start." "Oh, yes, very imaginative." Aziraphale's voice was flat and hopeless. "Good, we will expect you directly, then," said the voice. Well, I'll just clear up a few business matters, shall I?" said Aziraphale desperately. "There hardly seems to be any necessity," said the Metatron. Aziraphale drew himself up. "I really feel that probity, not to say morality, demands that as a reputable businessman I should—" Yes, said Metatron, a shade testily. "Point taken. We shall await you, then." The light faded, but did not quite vanish. "They're leaving the line open," Aziraphale thought. "I'm not getting out of this one." "Hello?" he said softly. "Anyone still there?" There was silence. Very carefully, he stepped over the circle and crept to the telephone. He opened his notebook and dialed another number. After 4 rings, it gave a little cough, followed by a pause, and then a voice which sounded so laid back he could put a carpet on it said, "Hi, this is Anthony Crowley. Crowley!" Aziraphale tried to hiss and shout at the same time. Listen! I haven't got much time. Probably not in right now, or asleep, and busy, or something, but... Shut up! Listen! It wasn't Tadfield! It's all in that book! You gotta stop! After the tone, and I'll get right back to you. Ciao! I want to talk to you now! Beep! Stop making noises! It's in Tadfield! That was what I was sensing! You must go there and... He took the phone away from his mouth. Bugger, he said. It was the first time he'd sworn in more than 4,000 years. Hold on. The demon had another line, didn't he? He was that kind of person. Aziraphale fumbled in the book, nearly dropping it on the floor. They would be getting impatient soon. He found the other number. He dialed it. It was answered almost immediately, at the same time as the shop's bell tingled gently. Crowley's voice, getting louder as it neared the mouthpiece, said, "You really mean it? Hello? Crowley, it's me." Ugh. The voice was horribly noncommittal, even in his present state. Aziraphale sensed trouble. "Are you alone?" he said cautiously. "Nah, I got an old friend here." "Listen! Away with ye, ye spawn of hell!" Very slowly, Aziraphale turned around. Shadwell was trembling with excitement. He'd seen it all. He'd heard it all. He hadn't understood any of it, but he knew what people did with circles and candlesticks and incense. He knew that all right. He'd seen the devil's riddles out... No, the devil rides out 15 times. 16 times if you included the time he'd been thrown out of the cinema for shouting his unflattering opinions of amateur witchfinder Christopher Lee. The buggers were using him. They'd been making fools out of the glorious traditions of the army. "I'll have ye, ye evil bastard!" he shouted, advancing like a moth-eaten avenging angel. "I ken what ye be about, coming up here and seducing women to do your evil will." I think perhaps you got the wrong shop," said Aziraphale. "I'll call back later," he told the receiver, and hung up. "I could see what ye were aboot," snarled Shadwell. There were flecks of foam around his mouth. He was more angry than he could ever remember. Things are not what they seem," Aziraphale began, aware even as he said it that as conversational gambits went it lacked a certain polish. "I bet they ain't," said Shadwell triumphantly. "No, I mean..." Without taking his eyes off the angel, Shadwell shuffled backwards and grabbed the shop door, slamming it hard so that the bell jangled. "Bell," he said. He grabbed the nice and accurate prophecies and thumped it down heavily on the table. "Book," he snarled. He fumbled in his pocket and produced his trusty Ronson. "Practically candle," he shouted, and began to advance. In his path the circle glowed with a faint blue light. Said Aziraphale, "I think it might not be a very good idea to..." Shadwell wasn't listening. "By the powers invested in me by virtue of my office of Witchfinder," he intoned, "I charge ye to quit from this place. You see the circle, and return henceforth to the place from which ye came, pausing not to... It would be really unwise for a human to set foot in it without... And deliver us from evil. Keep out of the circle, you stupid man! Never to come again to vex. Yes, but please keep out of..." Aziraphale ran toward Shadwell, waving his hands urgently. "Returning nae more," Shadwell finished. He pointed a vengeful black-nailed finger. Aziraphale looked down at his feet and swore for the second time in 5 minutes. He'd stepped into the circle. "Oh, fuck," he said. There was a melodious twang, and the blue glow vanished. So did Aziraphale. 30 seconds went by. Shadwell didn't move. Then with a trembling left hand he reached up and carefully lowered his right hand. "Hello?" he said. "Hello?" No one answered. Shadwell shivered. Then, with his hand held out in front of him like a gun that he didn't dare fire and didn't know how to unload, he stepped out into the street, letting the door slam behind him. It shook the floor. One of Aziraphale's candles fell over, spilling burning wax across the old dry wood. End of chapter. Okay. Mm-hmm. I like the very sparse use of swear words in this. It is good. Bah. Okay, next chapter. This is the funny little letter. A C in the shape of a demon. Look at it. Do 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 do. Yeah, and that book, that especially, I was so expecting more, but they actually censored the swears in that one. Very much, actually. Oddly enough. Right, yeah, let me take some more swigs of my caffeine and and we shall continue. Archie and Mira. Get along, you two goblins. Crowley's London flat was the epitome of style. It was everything that a flat should be. Spacious, white, elegantly furnished, and with that designer unlived-in look that only comes from not being lived in. This is because Crowley did not live there. It was simply the place he went back to at the end of the day when he was in London. The beds were always made, the fridge was always stocked with gourmet food that never went off. That was why that was why Crowley had a fridge, after all. And for that matter, the fridge never needed to be defrosted, or even plugged in. The lounge contained a huge television, a white leather sofa, a video and a laserdisc player, and an Answerphone, 2 telephones, the Answerphone line, and the private line, a number so far undiscovered by the legions of telephone salesmen who persisted in trying to sell Crowley double glazing, which he already had, or life insurance, which he didn't need, and a square matte black sound system, the kind so exquisitely engineered that it just has the on-off switch and the volume control. The only sound equipment Crowley had overlooked was speakers. He'd forgotten about them. Not that it made any difference. The sound reproduction was quite perfect anyway. There was an unconnected fax machine with the intelligence of a computer, and the computer with the intelligence of a not very smart ant. Nonetheless, Crowley upgraded it every few months because a sleek computer was the sort of thing Crowley felt that the sort of human he tried to be would have. This one was like a port for the screen. The manuals were still in their transparent wrapping. Footnote: along with the standard computer warranty agreement, which said that if the machine didn't work, didn't do what the expensive advertisement said, and electrocuted the immediate neighborhood, and in fact failed entirely to be inside the expensive box when you open it, this was expressly, absolutely, implicitly, and in no event the fault of responsibility of the manufacturer, and that the purchaser should consider himself lucky to be allowed to give his money to the manufacturer, and that any attempt to treat what had just been paid for as the purchaser's own property would result in the attentions of serious men with menacing briefcases and very thin watches. Crowley had been extremely impressed with the warranties offered by the computer industry, and had in fact sent a bundle below to the department that drew up the Immortal Soul agreements with a yellow memo form attached as saying, "Learn, guys." In fact, the only things in the flat Crowley devoted any personal attention to were the houseplants. They were huge and green and glorious, with shiny, healthy, lustrous leaves. This was because once a week Crowley went around the flat, typoed Fiat, with a green plastic plant miser spraying the leaves and talking to the plants. He said he had heard about talking to plants in the early 70s on Radio 4 and thought it an excellent idea, although talking is perhaps the wrong word for what Crowley did. What he did was put the fear of God into them, more precisely the fear of Crowley. In addition to which, every couple of months, Crowley would pick out a plant that was growing too slowly or succumbing to leaf wilt or browning, or just didn't look quite as good as the others, and he would carry it around to all the other plants. "Say goodbye to your friend," he'd say to them. "You just couldn't cut it." Then he would leave the flat with the offending plant and return an hour or so later with a large empty flower pot, which he would leave somewhere conspicuously around the flat. The plants were the most luxurious, verdant, and beautiful in London. Also the most terrified. The lounge was lit by spotlights and white neon tubes, of the kind one casually props against a chair or corner. The only wall decoration was a framed drawing, the cartoon for the Mona Lisa, Leonardo da Vinci's original sketch. Crowley had bought it from the artist one hot afternoon in Florence, and felt it was superior to the final painting. Footnote saying, Leonardo had felt so too. "I got her bloody smile right in the roughs," he told Crowley, sipping cold wine in the lunchtime sun. "But it went all over the place when I painted it. Her husband had a few things to say about it when I delivered it, but like I tell him, Signor del Giocondo, apart from you, who's going to see it anyway? Explain this helicopter thing again, will you?" Crowley had a bedroom, and a kitchen, and an office, and a lounge, and a toilet, each room forever clean and perfect. He had spent an uncomfortable time in each of these rooms during the long wait for the end of the world. He had phoned his operatives in the Witchfinder army again to try to get news, but his contact, Sergeant Chadwell, had just gone out, and the dim-witted receptionist seemed unable to grasp that he was willing to talk to any of the others. "Mr. Pulsifer is out too, love," she told him. "He went down to Tadfield this morning, on a mission." "I'll speak to anyone," Crowley had explained. "I'll tell Mr. Chadwell that," she had said, "when he gets back. Now, if you don't mind, it's one of my mornings, and I can't leave my gentleman like that for long or he'll catch his death. And at 2, I've got Mrs. Ormerod and Mr. Scroggy and young Julia coming over for a sitting, and there's the place to clean, and all beforehand. But I'll give Mr. Shadwell your message." Crowley gave up. He tried to read the novel, but couldn't concentrate. He tried to sort his CDs into alphabetical order, but gave up when he discovered they already were in alphabetical order, as was his bookcase and his collection of soul music. Footnote saying, he was very proud of his collection. It had taken him ages to put together. This was real soul music. James Brown wasn't in it. Eventually he settled down on the white leather sofa and gestured on the television. "Reports are coming in," said the worried newscaster. Reports are, well, nobody seems to know what's going on, but reports available to us would seem to indicate an increase in international tensions that would have undoubtedly been viewed as impossible this time last week when everyone seemed to be getting on so nicely. This would seem at least partially due to the spate of unusual events which have occurred over the last few days. "Off the coast of Japan, Crowley!" "Yes," admitted Crowley. "What the hell's going on, Crowley? What exactly have you been doing?" How do you mean?" Crowley asked, although he already knew. "The boy called Warlock. We have brought him to the fields of Megiddo. The dog is not with him. The child knows nothing of the Great War. He is not our master's son." "Ah," said Crowley. "Is that all you can say, Crowley? Our troops are assembled. The 4 beasts have begun to ride. But where are they riding to? Something has gone wrong, Crowley, and it is your responsibility, and in all probability your fault. We trust you have a perfectly reasonable explanation for all this." "Oh, yes," agreed Crowley, readily, "perfectly reasonable. Because you are going to have your chance to explain it all to us. You're going to have all the time there is to explain, and we will listen with great interest to everything you have to say, and your conversation and the circumstances that will accompany it will provide a source of entertainment and pleasure for all the damned of hell, Crowley. Because no matter how racked with torment, no matter what agonies the lowest of the damned are suffering, Crowley, you will have it worse. With a gesture, Crowley turned the set off. The dull gray-green screen continued enunciating. The silence formed itself into words. Do not even think about trying to escape us, Crowley. There is no escape. Stay where you are. You will be collected. Crowley went to the window and looked out. Something black and car-shaped was moving slowly down the street towards him. It was car-shaped enough to fool the casual observer. Crowley, who was observing very carefully, noticed that not only were the wheels not going around, but they weren't even attached to the car. It was slowing down as it passed each house. Crowley assumed that the car's passengers, neither of them would be driving, neither of them knew how, were peering out at the house numbers. He had a little time. Crowley went into the kitchen and got a plastic bucket from under the sink. Then he went back into the lounge. The infernal authorities had ceased communicating. Crowley turned the television to the wall just in case. He walked over to the Mona Lisa. Crowley lifted the picture down from the wall, revealing a safe. It was not a wall safe. It had been bought from a company that specialized in servicing the nuclear industry. He unlocked it, revealing the inner door with a dial tumble lock. He spun the dial. 4004 was the code, easy to remember, the year he had slithered onto his stupid marvelous planet back when it was gleaming and new. Inside the safe were a thermos flask, 2 heavy PVC gloves, of the kind that covered one's entire arms, and some tongs. Crowley paused. He eyed the flat nervously. There was a crash from downstairs. That had been the front door. He pulled on the gloves and gingerly took the flask, and the tongs, and the bucket, and as an afterthought he grabbed the plant mister from beside a luxuriant rubber plant and headed for his office, walking like a man carrying a thermos flask full of something that might cause, if he dropped it or even thought about dropping it, the sort of explosion that impels graybeards to make statements like, "And where this crater is now once stood the city of Washington," in SFB movies. He reached his office, nudged open the door with his shoulder, then he bent his legs and slowly put things down on the floor. Bucket, tongs, plant mister, and finally, deliberately, the flask. A bead of sweat began to form on Crowley's forehead and trickled down into one eye. He flicked it away. Then, with Karen's deliberation, he used the tongs to unscrew the top of the flask. Carefully. Carefully. That was it. A pounding on the stairs below him. A muffled scream. That would have been the little old lady on the floor below. He could not afford to rush. He gripped the flask with the tongs, and, taking care not to spill the tiniest drop, he poured the contents into the plastic bucket. One false move was all it would take. There. Then he opened the office door about 6 inches and placed the bucket on top. He used the tongs to replace the top of the flask. Then, a crash from his outer hallway. Pulled off the PVC gloves, picked up the plant mister, and settled himself behind his desk. "Crawley!" called the guttural voice. "Hastur." "He's through here," hissed another voice. "I can feel the slimy little creep." Ligur. Hastur and Ligur. Now, as Crowley would be the first to protest, most demons were deep down evil. In the great cosmic game, they felt they occupied the same position as tax inspectors, doing an unpopular job, maybe, but essential to the overall operation of the whole thing. If it came to that, some angels weren't paragons of virtue. Crowley had met one or two who, when it came to righteously smiting the ungodly, smote a good deal harder than was strictly necessary. On the whole, everyone had a job to do, and just did it. And on the other hand, you got people like Ligur and Hastur, who took such a dark delight in unpleasantness you might even have mistaken them for human. Crowley leaned back in his executive chair. He forced himself to relax and failed appallingly. "In here, people," he called. "We want a word with you," said Ligur, in a tone of voice intended to imply that word was synonymous with horrifically painful eternity, and the squad demon pushed open the office door. The bucket teetered, then fell neatly on Ligur's head. "Drop a lump of sodium in water. Watch it flame and burn and spin around crazily, flaring and sputtering. This was just like that, just nastier." The demon peeled and flared and flickered. Oily brown smoke oozed from it, and it screamed and screamed and it screamed. Then it crumpled, folded in on itself, and what was left lay glistening on the burnt and blackened circle of carpet, looking like a handful of mashed slugs. "Hi," said Crowley to Hastur, who had been walking behind Ligur, and had unfortunately not been so much as splashed. "There are some things that are unthinkable. There are some depths that not even demons would believe other demons would stoop to." "Holy water, you bastard," said Hastur. "You complete bastard. He hadn't never done nothing to you." "Yet," corrected Crowley, who felt a little more comfortable. Now the odds were closing to even. Closer, but not yet even, not by a long shot. Hastur was a Duke of Hell. Crowley wasn't even a local councillor. Your fate will be whispered by mothers in dark places to frighten their young," said Hastur, and then felt that the language of hell wasn't up to the job. "You're going to get taken to the bloody cleaners, pal," he added. Crowley raised the green plastic plant mister and sloshed it around threateningly. "Go away," he said. He heard the phone downstairs ringing 4 times, and then the answer phone caught it. He wondered vaguely who it was. "You don't frighten me," said Hastur. He watched the drip of water leak from the nozzle and slide slowly down the side of the plastic container towards Crowley's hand. "Do you know what this is?" asked Crowley. "This is a Sainsbury's plant mister, cheapest and most efficient plant mister in the world. It can squirt a fine spray of water into the air. Do I need to tell you what's in it? It can turn you into that." He pointed to the mess on the carpet. "Now go away." Then the drip on the side of the plant mister reached Crowley's curled fingers and stopped. "You're bluffing," said Hastur. "Maybe I am," said Crowley, in a tone of voice which he hoped made it quite clear that bluffing was the last thing on his mind. "And maybe I'm not. Do you feel lucky?" Hastur gestured, and the plastic bulb dissolved like rice paper, spilling water all over Crowley's desk, and all over Crowley's suit. "Yes," said Hastur. And then he smiled. His teeth were too sharp, and his tongue flickered between them. "Do you?" Crowley said nothing. Plan A had worked. Plan B had failed. Everything depended on Plan C. And there was one drawback to this. He had only ever planned as far as Plan B. "So," hissed Hastur, "time to go, Crowley." "I think there's something you ought to know," said Crowley, stalling for time. "And that is?" smiled Hastur. Then the phone on Crowley's desk rang. He picked it up and warned Hastur. "Don't move, there's something very important you should know. And I really mean it. Hello?" Said Crowley. Then he said, "Nah, got an old friend here." Aziraphale hung up on him. Crowley wondered what he had wanted. And suddenly Plan C was there, in his head. He didn't replace the handset on the receiver. Instead he said, "Okay, Hastur, you've passed the test. You're ready to start playing with the big boys." "Have you gone mad?" "Nope. Don't you understand? This was a test. The Lords of Hell had to know that you were trustworthy before we gave you command of the Legions of the Damned and the war ahead." "Crowley, you are lying, or you are insane. Or possibly you are both," said Hastur, but
his certainty was shaken. Just for a moment he had entertained the possibility that was where Crowley had gotten him. It was just possible that hell was testing him, that Crowley was more than he seemed. Hastur was paranoid, which was simply a sensible and well-adjusted reaction to living in hell, where they really were all out to get you. Crowley began to dial a number. "So okay, Duke, Hastur. I wouldn't expect you to believe it from me," he admitted, "but why don't we talk to the Dark Council? I'm sure that they can convince you." The number he had dialed clicked and started to ring. "So long, sucker," he said, and vanished. In a tiny fraction of a second, Hastur was gone as well. Over the years, a huge number of theological man-hours have been spent debating the famous question: how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? In order to arrive at an answer, the following facts must be taken into consideration. Firstly, angels simply don't dance. It's one of the distinguishing characteristics that marks an angel. They may listen appreciatively to the music of the spheres, but they don't feel the urge to get down and boogie to it. So, none. At least, nearly none. Aziraphale had learned to gavotte in a discreet gentleman's club in Portland Place in the late 1880s, and while he had initially taken to it like a duck to merchant banking, after a while he had become quite good at it, and was quite put out when, some decades later, the gavotte went out of style for good. So, providing the dance was a gavotte, and providing that he had a suitable partner, also able, for the sake of argument, both to gavotte and to dance it on the head of a pin, the answer is a straightforward 1. And then again, you might just as well ask how many demons can dance on the head of a pin. They're of the same original stock, after all, and at least they dance. Footnote saying, although it's not what you and I would call dancing, not good dancing anyway, a demon moves like the British group in the Eurovision Song Contest. Alright then, I wonder which Eurovision that was. And if you put it that way, the answer is quite a lot, actually, providing they abandon their physical bodies, which is a picnic for a demon. Demons aren't bound by physics. If you take the long view, the universe is just something small and round, like those water-filled balls which produce a miniature snowstorm when you shake them. Footnote saying, although unless the ineffable plan is a lot more ineffable than it's given credit for, it does not have a giant plastic snowman at the bottom. But if you look from really close up, the only problem about dancing on the head of a pin is all those big gaps between the electrons. For those of angel stock or demon breed, size and shape and composition are simply options. Crowley is currently traveling incredibly fast down the telephone line. Ring! Crowley went through 2 telephone exchanges at a very respectable fraction of light speed. Hastur was a little way behind him, 4 or 5 inches, but at that size it gave Crowley a very comfortable lead, one that would vanish, of course, when he came out the other end. They were too small for sound, but demons don't necessarily need sound to communicate. He could hear Hastur screaming behind him, "You bastard, I'll get you! You can't escape me! Ring! Wherever you come out, I'll come out too! You won't get away!" Crowley had traveled over 20 miles of cable in less than a second. Hastur was close behind him. Crowley was going to have to time this whole thing very, very carefully. Ring! That was the 3rd ring. Well, thought Crowley, here goes nothing. He stopped suddenly and watched Hastur shoot past him. Hastur turned and ring! Crowley shot out through the phone line, zapped through the plastic sheeting, and materialized, full size and out of breath, in his lounge. Click! The outgoing message tape began to turn on his answer phone. Then there was a beep and, as the incoming message tape turned, a voice from the speaker screamed after the beep. "Right! What? You bloody snake!" The little red message light began to flash. On and off, like a tiny red angry eye. Crowley really wished he had some more holy water, and the time to hold the cassette in it until it dissolved. But getting hold of Ligur's terminal bath had been dangerous enough. He'd had it for years just in case, and even its presence in the room made him uneasy. Or maybe, yes, What would happen if he put the cassette in the car? He could play Hustler over and over again until he turned into Freddie Mercury. No, he might be a bastard, but you could only go so far. There was a rumble of distant thunder. He had no time to spare. He had nowhere to go. He went anyway. He ran down to his Bentley and drove towards the West End as if all the demons of hell were after him, which was more or less the case. And the chapter. You know what? I don't suppose I might actually manage to read much more than this. When are the ads actually coming? This next chapter is only 10 minutes long, so I might be able to read another one, but maybe I should... It only tells my pre-rolls are off for another 10 minutes or so. Oh no, 20 minutes, so I guess that's when the ads are coming. I don't know why the next ad timer isn't there anymore, though. Give him... But hi, Hattie, as well. I feel like today my reading isn't as good as it was last week. Probably because of the grog. Damn you, grog. Damn you to hell, you bastard. Anyway. Let us continue for 10 minutes more, and then we will wrap up for the reading and play some more Shadow Tactics. Well, thank you, Minnie. Could not sleep because of the storm. Oh no! There was a storm. I hope you get some good snooze. No, I couldn't sleep because I just can't sleep lately. Yeah. I don't know. And then I oversleep anyway, so there you go, I guess. Anyway, let us continue real fast. Let me take this. This is great to chill with? Well, nice to know that my reading is good enough. Thank you. Thank you. Sometimes I feel bad about my reading, but it's good to hear that. It's good to hear that y'all like it. We got another M today. Right now, hold on, look at it. It's got a little boy's face on it, and a cigarette. Open file, zoom in. Or no, that's a little lady. That's not a little boy. That's a woman. Or no, that's a separate hand. Okay. Let us continue. Madame Tracy heard Mr. Shadwell's slow tread come up the stairs. It was slower than usual and paused every few steps. Normally he came up the stairs as if he hated every one of them. She opened her door. He was leaning against the landing wall. "Why, Mr. Shadwell," she said, "whatever have you done to your hand?" "Get away from me, woman!" Shadwell groaned. "I do not know my end powers." "Why are you holding it out like that?" Shadwell tried to back into the wall. "Stand back, I tell ye! I cannot be responsible." "What on earth has happened to you, Mr. Shadwell?" said Madame Tracy, trying to take his hand. "Nothing on earth! Nothing on earth!" She managed to grab his arm. He, Shadwell, scourge of evil, was powerless to resist being drawn into her flat. He'd never been in it before, at least in his waking moments. His dreams had furnished it in silks, rich hangings, and what he thought of as scented unguents. Admittedly, it did have a bead curtain in the entrance to the kitchenette, and the lamp made rather inexpertly from a Chianti bottle, because Madame Tracy's apprehension of it was chic, like Aziraphale's had grounded around 1953. And there was a table in the middle of the room with a velvet cloth on it, and on the cloth, the crystal ball which increasingly was Madame Tracy's means of earning a living. "I think you could do with a good lie down, Mr. Shadwell," she said, in a voice that brooked no argument, and led him on into the bedroom. He was too bewildered to protest. "But young Newt is out there," Shadwell muttered. "Enthralled to heathen passions and occult wiles." "Then I'm sure he'll know what to do about them," said Madame Tracy briskly, whose mental picture of what Newt was going through was probably much closer to reality than was Shadwell's. "And I'm sure he wouldn't like to think of you getting yourself worked up and just stayed here. Just you lie down and I'll make you both a nice cup of tea." She disappeared in a clacking of bead curtains. Suddenly Shadwell was alone on what he was just capable of recalling. Through the wreckage of his shattered nerves was a bed of sin, and right at this moment was incapable of deciding whether that was in fact better or worse than not being alone on a bed of sin. He turned his head to take in his surroundings. Madame Tracy's concept of what was erotic stemmed from the days when young men grew up thinking that women had beach balls affixed firmly to the front of their anatomy. Brigitte Bardot could be called a sex kitten without anyone bursting out laughing. And there really were magazines with names like Girls, Giggles, and Garters. Somewhere in this cauldron of permissiveness she had picked up the idea that soft toys in the bedroom created an intimate, coquettish air. Shadwell stared for some time at a large, threadbare teddy bear which had one eye missing and a torn ear. It probably had a name like Mr. Buggins. He turned his head the other way. His gaze was blocked by a pajama case shaped like an animal that may have been a dog, but there again might have been a skunk. It had a cheery grin. He said. But the recollection kept storming back. He really had done it. No one else in the army had ever exorcised a demon, as far as he knew. Not Hopkins, not Siftings, not Diceman, probably not even Witchfinder Company Sergeant Major Narker. Footnote reading: the WA enjoyed a renaissance during the great days of Empire expansionism. The British Army's endless skirmishes frequently brought it up against witch doctors, bone pointers, shaman, and other occult adversaries. This was the cue for the deployment of the like of WCSM Narker, whose striding, bellowing 6'6", 18-stone figure, clutching an armor-plated book, 8-pound bell, and specially reinforced candle, could clear the veldt of adversaries faster than a Gatling gun. Cecil Rhodes wrote of him, "Some remote tribes consider him to be a kind of god, and it is an extremely brave or full-hearted witch doctor who will stand his ground with CSM Narker bearing down on him. I would rather have this man on my side than 2 battalions of Gurkhas." Who held all-the-time records for most witches found? Sooner or later, even every army runs across its ultimate weapon, and now it existed. Shadwell reflected on the end of his arm. Well, sod no for its use. He'd have a bit of a rest, seeing as he was here, and then the powers of darkness had met their match at last. When Madame Tracy brought the tea in, he was snoring. He tactfully closed the door, and rather thankfully as well, because she had a séance due in 20 minutes, and it was no good turning down money these days. Although Madame Tracy was by many yardsticks quite stupid, she had an instinct in certain matters, and when it came to dabbling in the occult, her reasoning was faultless. Dabbling, she'd realized, was exactly what her customers wanted. They didn't want to be shoved up in it up to their necks. They didn't want the multiplanular mysteries of time and space. They just wanted to be reassured that Mother was getting along fine now that she was dead. They wanted just enough occult seasoning the simple fare in their lives, and preferably in portions no longer than 45 minutes, followed by tea and biscuits. They certainly didn't want odd candles, scents, chants, or mystic runes. Madame Tracy had even removed most of the major arcana from her tarot card pack because their appearance tended to upset people, and she made sure that she had always put sprouts on to boil just before a séance. Nothing is more reassuring, nothing is more true to the comfortable spirit of English occultism than the smell of Brussels sprouts cooking in the next room. It was early afternoon, and the heavy storm clouds had turned the sky the color of old lead. It would turn rain soon heavily, blindingly. The firemen hoped the rain would come soon. The sooner the better. They had arrived fairly promptly, and the younger firemen were dashing around excitedly, unrolling their hosepipe and flexing their axes. The older firemen knew at a glance that the building was a dead loss, and weren't even sure that the rain would stop it, spreading to neighboring buildings when a black Bentley skidded around the corner and drove up onto the pavement at a speed somewhere in excess of 60 miles per hour, and stopped with a screech of brakes half an inch away from the wall of the bookshop. An extremely agitated young man in dark glasses got out and ran towards the door of the blazing bookshop even. He was intercepted by a fireman. "Are you the owner of this establishment?" asked the fireman. "Don't be stupid. Do I look like I run a bookshop?" "I really wouldn't know about that, sir. Appearances can be very deceptive. For example, I am a fireman. However, upon meeting me socially, people unaware of my occupation often suppose that I am, in fact, a chartered accountant or company director. Imagine me out of uniform, sir, and what kind of man would you see before you? Honestly." "A prat," said Crowley, and he ran into the bookshop. This sounds easier than it actually was, since in order to manage it, Crowley needed to avoid half a dozen firemen, 2 policemen, and a number of interesting Soho night people. Footnote reading: in any other place than Soho, it is quite possible that spectators at the fire might have been interested. Out early and arguing heatedly amongst themselves about which particular section of society had brightened up the afternoon, and why. Crowley pushed straight through them. They scarcely spared him a glance. Then he pushed open the door and stepped into an inferno. The whole bookshop was ablaze. "Aziraphale!" he called. "Aziraphale, you stupid... Aziraphale, are you there?" He answered. No answer, even. Just the crackle of burning paper, the splintering of glass as the fire reached the upstairs rooms, the crash of collapsing timbers. He scanned the shop urgently, desperately, looking for the angel, looking for help. In the far corner, a bookshelf toppled over, cascading flaming books across the floor. The fire was all around him, and Crowley ignored it. His left trouser leg began to smolder. He stopped it with a glance. "Hello, Aziraphale? For somebody's sake, Aziraphale!" The shop window was smashed from outside. Crowley turned, startled, and an unexpected jet of water struck him full in the chest, knocking him to the ground. His shades flew to a far corner of the room and became a puddle of burning plastic. They revealed yellow eyes with slitted vertical pupils. Wet and steaming, face ash-blackened, as far from cool as it was possible for him to be, on all fours in the blazing bookshop, Crowley cursed Aziraphale, and the ineffable plan, and above and below. Then he looked down and saw it. The book that the girl had left in the car with Tadfield on Wednesday night. It was slightly scorched around the cover, but miraculously unharmed. He picked it up, stuffed it in his jacket pocket, stood up unsteadily, and brushed himself off. The floor above him collapsed. With a roar and gargantuan shrug, the building fell in on itself, in a rain of brick and timber and flaming debris. Outside, the passers-by were being herded back by the police, and the fireman was explaining to anyone who would listen. "I couldn't stop him. He must have been mad or drunk. Just ran in. I couldn't stop him. Mad. Ran straight in. Horrible way to die. Horrible. Horrible. Just ran straight in." Then Crowley came out of the flames. The police and the firemen looked at him, saw the expression on his face, and stayed exactly where they were. He climbed into the Bentley and reversed back into the road, swung around the fire truck, into Wardour Street, and into the darkened afternoon. They stared at the car as it sped away. Finally, one policeman spoke. "Weather like this? He ought to have put his lights on," he said, numbly. "Especially driving like that. Could be dangerous," agreed another, in flat, dead tones. And they all stood there in the light and the heat of the burning bookshop, wondering what was happening to a world they had thought they understood. There was a flash of lightning, blue-white, strobing across the cloud-black sky, a rumble of thunder so loud it hurt, and the hard rain began to fall. End of chapter. I think that's quite enough for today. I think it really is, yep. My throat, I think, could handle some more reading, but I feel like I need to, like, just rest. Which means I'm gonna put off the game I was going to play today to tomorrow. I think instead of playing it, right now, I'll just do it after the stream tomorrow. Because I need to eat something, and then I need to just kind of chill. They look British. Everyone's very British in this, Hattie. I like how the footnotes that explain Britishisms assume that anybody reading this is an American. And not British in any other way. There are only two types of people in the world. The Brits and the Americans, I suppose, and nobody else. But hi. I'm here. I'm gonna turn the music on now. The real music. And we shall talk. My brain's a little plonked out. And I'd say I can't really recall what I read, but it's like I remember, but I can't remember enough to put it into my mouth, you know, that kind of thing. I like the little children in the quarry, like bringing on the apocalypse, but like for entirely different reasons. And them basically being a different kind of set of horsemen, while the real ones gathered around for Armageddon. No, babbies are just there kinda to play around. I don't like it, but it's funny how there's another slur today. That was funny. And also, very slight racism in the fact that Japanese things were named wasabi, and then the Japanese place was just like nigiri sushi. It's the 90s, baby. It's a book from 1990. It's 1990, baby. They were just like that back then. What can you do, huh? I wonder which author's idea was that. Yeah, I wonder. I'm gonna... You think Terry Pratchett was that? I mean, he's a funny guy, I suppose. But I feel like back then anybody would have made a joke like that. That's, I believe anybody would have made like a joke like that for sure. Yeah, but watch the series, Fred? No, I have not, Eisenheim. Not yet. I want to finish the book first before I get you that. And don't suppose the series is complete? I'm not sure. But I feel like I would want to do that afterwards, because that seems like a fun time. It's got a decent rating on IMDb. It has got 2 seasons out. But yeah, so I got nothing really. I got nothing. My brain is stopping. I need to stop. I see Minnie sent me something here about people playing Lifeline in the collab? Wait, how does that work? What are they doing? Let us raid those people and see what they are doing. Yes. Let's see if they're going insane or not. Let's see how insane style Masoku is going with their friend Masamunmun. Let us yeah, that's all I gotta say really. Tomorrow I'll read some more of the book. I don't think I'll manage to finish it because we are currently at 62% of the book through. Which yeah, I couldn't read that much today, I suppose. But that's fine. That's fine if I have to read it longer than this. I feel like those page counts on Wikipedia, like how tall was this book, you know? Like they say the page count's like 200 something pages, but this is taking me longer than like other books that were longer. I don't know. I suppose like Hitchhiker's Guide had very short pages sometimes, for example. And this one's like filled up. I don't know. Or maybe I'm just reading differently. Rushing less and stuff. Whatever. If I have to read it longer, I'll read it longer, because this is a fun book. Everybody grab your motivational lines. We'll come back tomorrow with some more reading. And if I feel well enough, Shadow Gambit. Man, I haven't been able to stream properly so much lately, huh? Something always gets in the way, man. Anyway, thanks all for being here. I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.